want to ask that we remain standing for just a moment as we recognize and extend our sympathies to Bishop Emeritus Sidney Charles, who have passed on after serving this country for 40 plus years. So let us just pause for a moment as we recognize his passing. May he rest in peace. Pray be seated.
Item number 3, oath of allegiance or affirmation of a new member. Item number 4, confirmation of minutes.
Leader of government business. Honorable members, the question is that the minutes of the proceeding of the House of Representatives held at the Parliament Chamber on Wednesday, 18th July 2018 be taken as read. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. Think the ayes have it? The ayes have it. Leader of government business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the said minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the House of Representatives held at the Parliament Chamber on Wednesday, 18 July 2018 be confirmed.
Honorable members, the question is that the said minutes be confirmed. Those of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. Think the ayes have it? The ayes have it.
Item number 5, messages from the Governor General. Item number 6, announcements by Mr. Speaker.
I welcome you to the third sitting of the first session of the Kent Parliament. Let me say to you that we ought to be eternally grateful because 40 years ago today, our country, don't face it, our country was changed. A fellow Ivan gave his job. Today, as we look around, we will find very few reminders of what we saw on the morning of the 8th of September. So I urge us to be always remember and to give thanks and be grateful to God for his mercies. I also want to take this opportunity to commend our netball team, who has just done very well at the netball tournament. And so, congratulations to the management and the leader of that team, Senator Glennis Roberts, and others, and the members of the team for a job well done and putting Grenada on the map again. Honorable members, I also want to urge us to manage our phone well so that it would not be disturbing and providing the kind of feedback that would interfere with our broadcast and sitting in the house. So we may have to use it, but please do not let it be a disturbance. Honorable Representative, I must take this opportunity to say to all parliamentary representatives that you have a right to protest and to make the issues which affect you and or your constituencies known. If you choose to voice your protest at the sitting of the House of Representatives, that is your right, as you are protesting to your employers. That is the constituents at whose pleasure you sit in the chamber of this honorable House. I must mention, honorable member for the constituency of St. George Northeast, your protest at the last sitting held at the 18th of July 2018 is not the issue here. The action which followed the verbal protest is the issue. The writing of a check exclusive of the NIS deduction and causing it to be placed on the Speaker's desk while the House is in session could be interpreted to be improper or even disrespectful to the Parliament and the Speaker. Please be reminded that neither the Speaker nor the office of the Parliament pays to the parliamentary representatives their salary. This is done by the Ministry of Finance. So any return of remuneration received in the future, that check should be made payable to the Government of Grenada and sent to the Ministry of Finance. Honorable member, I consider the action which followed the verbal protest an error in judgment and advise that it will not occur again in this House. Thank you.
Item number 7, presentation of petitions. Item number 8, presentation of papers and reports from select committees.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the following papers be laid on the table. 1, report of the Director of Audit Grenada on the resources managed for the period 1st January 2017 to 31st December 2017 by the Project Coordination Unit within the Ministry of Finance and Energy, Safety Net Advancement Project, SNAP SNAP. 2, report of the Director of Audit Grenada on the financial statements of the Basic Needs Trust Fund, the BNTF, Grenada, for the period 1st January 2017 to 31st December 2017. 3, Grenada Development Bank 2017 Annual Report. 4, Annual report of the National Insurance Board, NIS, for the period ended 31st December 2016. 5. Annual report 2017, Grenada Council for Technical and Vocational Education and the Training / National Training Agency, GCTVET/NTA. 6. Report of the Director of Audit Grenada on the financial statements of the Grenada Bureau of Standard for the year ended 31st December 2017. 7. Report of the Director of Audit Grenada on the resources managed for the period 1st January 2017 to 31st December 2017 by the Project Coordination Unit within the Ministry of Finance and Energy for the Regional Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, RDVRP. 8. Office of the Ombudsman Annual Report 2017. 9. Grenada Ports Authority Annual Report and Account 2017. 10. Report of the Director of Audit Grenada on the financial statements of the Office of the Integrity Commission for the year ended 31st December 2016. And 11. Representation by the Minister for Finance, Planning, Economic Development and Physical Development on the 2017 report of the Fiscal Responsibility Oversight Committee.
Honorable members, the papers and reports of select committees have been placed at the table.
Item number 9, unopposed private business. Item number 10, questions. Item number 11, urgent questions under the provisions of Standing Order number 21, notice of questions. Item number 12, statements by ministers.
Honorable Representative for St. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to inform this Honorable House of some very important events that have been taking place in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique under Ministry of Tourism, and also, well, both ministries. The ministry of, one is more exclusive to tourism, and the other, which is Carnival, which demonstrates significant collaboration between the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Culture. Mr. Speaker, I would like, through you, to take this opportunity to communicate some very important statistics to this Honorable House in regard to our visitor arrivals during the Carnival season. And for the Carnival season, the numbers are taken for a period of 20 days before Carnival. So these statistics represent the visitor arrivals 20 days prior to our 2018 arrivals. Mr. Speaker, we are very proud of the great collaboration that was exercised between the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Culture to improve the product on the part of the Ministry of Culture, but also there was great collaboration in the marketing of our country. For months now, since Carnival was launched, the Ministry of Tourism, particularly through the GTA, has been advertising our Carnival, either through the modern media means that they use now, and also through the physical visits in collaboration with culture that was done in Trinidad, was done in the United States and Canada and other places. And that resulted in a resounding increase in our numbers. So the projection for increase for our numbers was 5.3 prior to the Carnival season. And we were rewarded by our efforts with an increase of 24.9% increase of visitors, Mr. Speaker. They came from all over. And the two areas that were of great interest and maybe gave us the edge over other islands were our jab jab and our Monday night mass. That is what the people like. This is our heritage, this is our culture, our jab jab and the Monday night mass outdid itself, Mr. Speaker. And what everybody was also saying is the peace and the safety and the comfort they feel. So underlying everything that we do, everything that we say as ministries, even more important is what our people have done. And that is what tourists are saying all the time, how our people are, they're so kind, they're helpful, and they are peaceful. And these are values that we must not underestimate, we must not take for granted, and that we must keep that kind of difference, unique difference between us and our competitors, because tourism is highly competitive. And if we do not do what people like or give them the experience that they are expecting and even exceed that expectation, we will not have people coming to our shores. So through you, Mr. Speaker, I want to compliment Team Grenada, our people, government, the citizens, everyone who has played a role. The police especially did an excellent job in keeping their peace. They were very vigilant, very visible, and I want to compliment them for that as well. Mr. Speaker, just to highlight a few areas. We saw growth from most of our source markets. Some had a slight decrease, but these are areas where people do not usually come in any numbers for Carnival. But we are looking at our numbers critically and making decisions and making plans as to where we would market more effectively come in the next few months, because we have to take a page from Trinidad's Carnival. When one Carnival finishes, they start working for the next one. But to give a few stats, Mr. Speaker, Canada, the numbers in 2017 were 831. In 2018 was 1,379, an increase of 65%. The Caribbean, an increase of 25% from 2,144 to 2,681. CARICOM, the wider CARICOM, 25% increase. From Trinidad and Tobago, we had an increase of 38.5%, Mr. Speaker, and that is one of the areas where we marketed heavily between culture and the GTA. From Europe, we had an increase of 31%, from 1,845 persons to 2,417, and from UK, an increase of 35%. I want to underscore UK, an increase of from 1,628. These numbers are 2017 numbers, and the increase are the 2018 numbers, an increase to 2,206. Mr. Speaker, I mention UK specifically because over the past years since Brexit, our numbers from UK fluctuated, and it was always a concern for us. We have in recent time beefed up our marketing in the UK, and this is one of the results that we are seeing. Mr. Speaker, I am particularly pleased and grateful to our Minister for Finance and our Ministry for Finance for committing significant funds to increase our ability to market, and to the staff of the Ministry of Finance for providing the funds in a timely manner so that we could do this, so that our people could benefit, Mr. Speaker. The numbers, when we talk about the numbers of people who come, we also have to look at how it has boosted the economy. How the taxi drivers, the small vendors, the hoteliers, I've never seen them so happy. I have more friends in the hotel sector than I've ever had before. Everybody is smiling because we are doing, they are happy we're doing what we had to do. And that is our duty as a government, and to plan well, but also execution depends largely on the Minister and the Ministry for Finance. So through you, Mr. Speaker, I want to compliment the member for St. George Northwest, our Prime Minister, and our Minister for Finance for working out the figures so that some extra monies could have gone into the sector. Mr. Speaker, we're doing a lot more in improving our product, our attractions. We're looking at making the experience for our visitors even more memorable. And in the next few days, our Prime Minister will be hosting one of our biggest cruise lines executive. 5 of them are coming to Grenada to visit with us from Carnival Cruise Lines. This was a cruise line that we had lost at some time, and now they're coming back stronger than before. We're courting them, we're working with them, and we want to show them a good time within the few hours they're going to be here, and our Prime Minister is going to be leading the charge to make requests for what we want and to make commitments to them so that they will see Grenada as a very viable destination. Mr. Speaker, I move now to the second success we've had, and it has to do with the cruise line. So as I speak about that, I want to mention that very recently, Grenada was named as the top-rated southern cruise destination in Cruise Critics for the 2nd year. Mr. Speaker, the people who rate are the people who have been here and who have been to other destinations, and Grenada was rated. And southern is important because the northern islands like Jamaica and those further or closer to Puerto Rico and the United States, which a lot of the cruise originate from, it's easier for cruise lines to plan to go to these islands. And when they come far south as Grenada, we are practically the last destination that cruises go to, because Trinidad is not big on cruise. And when they come this far south, and I want to say here, Mr. Speaker, to clarify that while our numbers increased due to the hurricane problems that other countries suffered, it was not the sole reason. It was to a significant extent due to the fact that we marketed well, our people behaved well, and the people love Grenada. Let us keep it that way. Let us keep it natural. And our numbers, our expectation for 2018, which our season starts somewhere in October, to 2019, our expectation is that it would grow, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I am very happy for that. I just want to end with one of the reviews that was given. Somebody said, "This is my favorite port. It looks like a fairy tale village." And that is why we have to keep it clean and not dump indiscriminately on our ports, so that the first image that people see of our country is an environmentally unfriendly one. And I'm sure when we speak about the styrofoam and all of these things, that's why we're taking measures to protect our health, the health of our people, but also our image within the international arena. People see us as we market ourselves, pure Grenada, Isle of Spice. People should be seeing Grenada clean and smelling spice and enjoying the warmth of our people. So this lady says, people are friendly. We walked through the historic tunnel. We climbed the top of the hill to see the ruins of the old church and the steeple, and so on and so on and so on. So these are some of the things that people value. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I want to compliment Team Grenada for working together, but I also want to exhort that we look at some of our habits that are impacting negatively on us, on our people, our country, and that we work together to harmonize. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister for Tourism and Culture. Just before I recognize you, Honorable Parliamentary Representative, I want to say welcome to Sir Andrew Augustine, who is sitting up front this morning. And he fitted in so well that I forgot it's the first time. I don't know if it's a wig. So I want to welcome Sir Andrew Augustine, who is the crack assistant, and to say to you, we wish you a very enjoyable time at the Parliament. Honorable Representative for St. Andrew Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'll probably start by saying that our loss is your gain. And so I want to join you by welcoming Mr. Augustine, who is coming from the Ministry of Education. So I want to join you on that. So, Speaker, this morning I just want to quickly add on two subjects that I would have spoken to publicly in recent times, and that is to give a quick update as it relates to the school books program, where we are. Of course, we know that all parents, students would be interested in knowing, and I want to use the opportunity this morning. First of all, to say, Mr. Speaker, that the goal was to have our books here during the August vacation so that they would be ready for the start of the school year. We've been able to accomplish that to a large extent. As a matter of fact, we have one container of books that arrived late and arrived over the last weekend and is being distributed now. Mr. Speaker, we would want to perfect that. We would want to improve that even further to probably try, with the support of Ministry of Finance next time around, to probably have the school books even before school closes. So we are working on getting to that point. But just to say that we've been able to distribute to all schools thus far, of course, the first quota of books. There are some social studies books that would be delivered over the weekend and into early next week. That's for the primary schools. And for the secondary schools, we do have some remaining books for delivery to secondary schools. Mr. Speaker, I want to also add here the investment that this government has made this year in our school books, some $2.6 million. And of course, we know that the focus of this program has been for public schools on island, for students who are in need of those books. Mr. Speaker, we want to continue to stress that this is a revolving books program, which means that at the end of the school year, before a child collects the new books, they are supposed to be returning the books that they would have used in the previous school year. If that does not happen, it would be impossible for the program to run smoothly and effectively. So we want to appeal to all concerned. While I say this, Mr. Speaker, I want to admit publicly, as I've said before, we do not have the best system in place for the management of the program. We don't. Not at the ministry level in terms of the support systems, and not at the school level. And so what we are doing, very soon we're going to be going to Cabinet with a revised proposal as to how this program would be managed in this school year. That would be taking into consideration what exists at the school level and what exists at the ministry. While I say this, Mr. Speaker, I want to also highlight that there are some best practices. So there are some schools where what they are doing even needs to be promoted because they are doing an excellent job at the program. So it is not a case where every school has the same problem. So we want to correct the deficiencies within the program. Mr. Speaker, I want to clarify here, and I don't think we have done this before. What is being said out there by probably persons who want to mislead the general public as it relates to the process through which the supplier was selected. And we're talking about the supplier being Standards Bookshop. Mr. Speaker, there was times in the past where the ministry took a decision that we would share this thing equally among the different suppliers, the different bookstores on island. But of course, Mr. Speaker, times change, laws change, requirements change. And so the new procurement law mandates the ministry to do things in a particular way. And let me say, I'm happy to report, Mr. Speaker, that the ministry did follow the law as it relates to procurement of books for this school year. Standard Bookshop was selected on 3 conditions. 1, that they had the lowest bid. Secondly, they were able to deliver books in the shortest, or they were able to commit to delivering books in the shortest time. And thirdly, they had the best condition for payment. We were not in a position to pay upfront for purchase of the books. And so those were the 3 guiding factors in selecting Standard Bookshop. And I want to make this very clear because there are others who are saying otherwise. I want to commend the staff at the Ministry of Education for the process and following the process to the T. So, Speaker, I want to quickly make mention, too, that we've had a generally good day last Monday as it relates to the opening of schools. School opened and teachers are back, principals are back, and we want to express our best wishes to them. However, you may have heard in the media of one case in one school where students turned up in 2 different uniforms. So, Speaker, to me, that is a representation of disorder. It represents, to me, chaos, and the Ministry of Education has no choice but to deal with this situation. Mr. Speaker, I want to make very clear, and sometimes when things happen, it also gives an opportunity to remind that the Education Act is the only document that we are being guided as it relates to the change of uniform in a school. And the Act is very clear. In Section 51(1), it gives the right to the principal to consult on change in uniform, attire, as it says, for change in rules, things that the school may want to change. It gives the principal the right to consult on those things. But later down in that section, Section 2 of 51(b) says, it's okay to consult, but the change cannot happen unless the principal has in writing permission from the Ministry of Education, the Chief Education Officer. Mr. Speaker, in the case of that school, the ministry would have indicated verbally and in writing that it was not granting permission for change in uniform. We expect that the principal of that school would take the leadership that is expected. And we expect that she will do as any other principal will do or is expected to do if a student shows up in the wrong uniform. So where we are now, Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned that this matter has gone past change in uniform. And it has gone past change in uniform to, unfortunately, it is in boundary with things that concern us greatly, like the implication this has for the management of the education system. Implications, Mr. Speaker, for students' respect for authority. And Mr. Speaker, this matter cannot be treated lightly. I've received calls from parents who said to me, I chose to send my children in this new uniform because A, I did not want my child to be, or my children to be victimized, or I did not want my children to look odd. And parents are calling the ministry, calling the minister to ask for direction. As far as we are aware, the leadership of the school is supposed to provide direction in this matter. So, Speaker, you served as a principal for many years, and I'm sure you have not forgotten what happens when a child shows up in the wrong uniform. And so it's very sad, Mr. Speaker, because I believe that the parents of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, it is not that they want to break any rule, it is not that they want to defy the authority of the Ministry of Education. I boil this down to poor leadership and poor management, and this will be dealt with, Mr. Speaker. But I also want to make the point, too, Mr. Speaker, that if we allow this to go without being noticed, without taking the necessary action for correction of this situation, it means that other things, so it means that a principal can just decide to change the curriculum, could just decide to do anything that he or she feels, and where does that leave us? What is going to happen to a system that so many persons would have invested in building? We cannot afford to go this direction. About a month, 2 months ago, we visited Carriacou and Petite Martinique. The team went to Carriacou. So, Speaker, we met with parents, we met with students, we met with principals, we met with teachers. Broad consultation and engagement. We've heard the concerns, we've heard the challenges re-education in Carriacou. And we pledge to all concerned that we are going to work together to address some of those issues and concerns. I remember when we met with teachers, one of the major issues they raised was that August vacation is coming up. And in Grenada, you would normally have all of those training exercises for teachers. And we are sometimes left out, because of course, sometimes the concern is the travel cost, the boarding cost, and so on. And we said to them, we are going to make a difference this year. We are going to find a way. And through funding from the CDB, we were able to accommodate teachers from Carriacou, and they were extremely happy that they were involved in the process. Mr. Speaker, this to us was keeping with our commitment that in all that we do, we are going to give serious consideration for Carriacou and Petit Martinique. Bishop's College, major concern with regards to the delay in that project of rebuilding a wing at that school. CDB-funded project. We again pledge that we are going to do everything possible to swiftly move forward. And we have been reaching out in every way to work with Carriacou and Petit Martinique. And I want to thank all of those who have been cooperating, Mr. Speaker. This is a major exception to the rule. And I don't believe it's a representation of the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique and what they want. Mr. Speaker, I end here by saying that if we have to achieve, we have to work together. And the Ministry of Education remains committed to working with the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique to resolve this matter.
Thank you, Honorable Minister for Education. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to draw to the attention of this Honorable House and to the nation that which has been publicized by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the closure of Petrotrin, and that the region will no longer be receiving products, petrochemical products, gasoline, diesel, etc., from the refinery in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Speaker, from the 1st of October 2018, the region will have to look elsewhere. I have obtained the permission from the Prime Minister, whom I represented at the Prime Ministerial Steering Subcommittee. We met on the 5th in Barbados, and this was given its due attention, Mr. Speaker. For the region, Petrotrin supplies over 70% of the products to the region. And some who do have storage, for example, in Antigua, you have storage facilities, etc. But the people could only boast about storage for about 6 weeks, Mr. Speaker. 2 months at the maximum. What happens then? The implication for Grenada, Mr. Speaker, and the rest, most countries in the rest of the region, is that we have to look for an alternative source of supply. Where do we turn to? Some of the local suppliers, like Saul, they're looking to import extraterritorially, import from the USA. Immediately, Mr. Speaker, we see the increase in prices. Longer shipping period, more handling, bunking and debunking, etc. They have written to us asking for the removal of the common external tariff. That's when we purchase goods from outside the region. Collectively, we must pay the produce will attract the common external tariff. The Prime Ministerial Subcommittee as agreed, Trinidad and Tobago was present, that we could remove the common external tariff. All we'd have to do is the paperwork, right to CARICOM, etc. And although this was only a subcommittee, the work will be done quickly. The entire, all the heads will be written to immediately so that this will get, it will be recommended to them. And with Trinidad already saying no, not objecting because they cannot supply, we know that this will be done. However, there is the expectation that wherever we get it from. But we are looking regionally, we're looking extra-regionally, and we're looking at not only one of the local suppliers, but both of them, and any other supplier that will be accessible. But one thing, Mr. Speaker, CARICOM has decided to go together, because with unity and with buying in bulk, we can reduce whatever extra cost there is. So immediately, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of, the Department of Energy is working together with those who already supply in Grenada and looking at new sources of supply, Mr. Speaker. So although we're not comfortable, we believe collectively CARICOM will be able to solve it. And we are in a state, Mr. Speaker, where we cannot look towards Venezuela, who do supply Petrocarib. As a matter of fact, Petrocarib lost the contract for supplying diesel to Grenada on a competitive bid because of the high cost of transporting the diesel fuel from Guyana to Grenada. So at least our plant, electrical plant, is out of that particular problem. However, they're purchasing from Sol, and Sol now will have to look extra, the region. So we see the implication, Mr. Speaker, not only in Grenada, and not only for the price to the local consumer to transportation, but also the price to the energy company, which brings us to the point, Mr. Speaker, of how we must manage. In a situation like this, Mr. Speaker, where all the costs will be passed on to the consumer, we need to come to an arrangement where everyone will take part of the cost and bear the burden, Mr. Speaker. So I wish to advise this Honorable House that CARICOM has this fully in the sights, and although we cannot say from where, whether Rubis or Shell or another party, the fuel will come, and for how long we'll remain in this boat, but the region is looking and taking care of it, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Item number 13, personal explanations. Item number 14, motions.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion standing in my name, motion 14A, which reads, whereas debate on the gracious address delivered by the Governor General on the occasion of the ceremonial state opening of the first session of the 10th Parliament on Friday, 27th April 2018 was deferred to a date to be named, be it resolved that the said address be further deferred to a date to be named.
Honorable members, the question proposes that the gracious address delivered by the Governor General on the occasion of the ceremonial opening of the first session of the 10th Parliament on Friday, 27th April 2018 was deferred to a date to be named, that this address be further deferred to a date to be named. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second motion, motion 14B, standing in my name, which reads, whereas it is provided by Section 3, subsection 2 of the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Act, number 9 of 2018, excuse me, hereinafter referred to as the Act, that the minister may by order designate non-biodegradable products for the purpose of the Act. Whereas it is provided under subsection 3, subsection 2 of the Act, that before such order comes into effect, it shall have been approved by the House of Representatives. And whereas it is now expedient for the non-biodegradable waste control expanded polystyrene order 2018 attached hereto as a schedule be approved by the House of Representatives, now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to the provision of section 3, subsection 2 of the Act, that the non-biodegradable waste control expanded polystyrene order 2018 be now approved by the House of Representatives.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that pursuant to the provisions of Section 3 of the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Act, that the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Order 2018 be now approved of the House of Representatives. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this Honorable House and the nation may recall that we debated and passed, and indeed it was passed in the other place, and it is now an act of the Parliament, that we will reduce the use of non-biodegradable items in our daily lives, whether it's shopping at the supermarket, and remove the plastic bags, whether it's the styrofoam box that we purchase goods and food in. And we took the decision, Mr. Speaker, to ban these things, going in stages, Mr. Speaker. And the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Expanded Polystyrene Order 2018 has been signed by the Minister of Responsibility for the Environment on the 30th day of August 2018, Mr. Speaker. And as such, because the Act provides that before it takes effect, it must be approved by the House of Representatives. And this order was formed as subsidiary legislation. In other words, it was done pursuant to the Act, prepared by the Ministry of Legal Affairs, signed by the Minister, but now it must be made public. The entire nation, the Parliament must know about it, and it must be debated in this House, in this place, and pass for it to take effect, Mr. Speaker. I will leave the details to my colleague, Mr. Speaker, some of whom are extremely passionate on the removal of plastic from our society in total and all non-biodegradable items. And so, Mr. Speaker, I commend this motion to the Honorable House.
Honorable Representative for St. George South.
Mr. Speaker, I stand in support, full support of this motion. Mr. Speaker, to be honest, I think we are, as I have said previously, way overdue on this. But what I would like to say, apart from supporting this motion, is that to the public, through you, Mr. Speaker, that this motion and subsequent motion that will follow deals with the type of what we as a people are determining to be offensive litter, but that we still need to deal with litter in general, because we are now banning certain items that are non-degradable, biodegradable, that will remain in our society for hundreds of years. We still need to address the issue of that which remains in our society for a year, the paper products, etc. And we will deal with that. But the start first of all is to make sure that as a people, that the lasting impression we leave on this beautiful country is not styrofoam that remains for hundreds of years. That the lasting impression that we will leave on this beautiful country will be a positive one, not non-biodegradable substances that will remain way beyond us. In fact, Mr. Speaker, probably way beyond this House. Some of these products still remain in our society way beyond. And what the message that needs to be brought across to the public at large is that this simple, innocent act of throwing one item out remains for hundreds of years. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand in full support of this motion and look forward to not just its subsequent passing, but its complete enforcement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. George South. Honourable Representative for St. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too rise in support of the motion as presented by the member for St. George Southeast. Quite a lot has been said, a lot of statistics were given in the previous session when this bill was presented, and therefore I would not say much on that except to say that this is a topic that we need to keep in the forefront of our conversations in the Trial and State of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. There's a lot more to be done, but a giant step, I would say a quantum leap, has been taken in that, in the decision, first of all, by our government to ban styrofoam, in the support that this decision has received by the business sector and by other people in the community, and also passing this bill here. Mr. Speaker, but I think that a lot of our people, I want to take this moment to compliment Grenadians again for taking the lead in that. In that while we're putting a list together and we're putting time frames together, quite a number of people, businesses, have already moved. So, you know, I want to compliment Grenadians on that. Yesterday we had an activity at the airport and I was given a bit of refreshment, and it was in a biodegradable box. And the glasses were biodegradable. And so many times the person in the highest position in our country, our Governor General, the other day she sent me a document, and it was in a paper bag instead of a plastic bag. So, you know, our people are moving in the right direction, and I have no fear that in short order, this thing will change. For those few who have not really thought about it or who have concerns about it, we are aware that change is difficult. But I just want to say to them that once the change is made, years from now we'll be wondering, why did we use styrofoam? Why didn't we change before? Because we'll see the impact on the volumes of garbage that we have, and also the positive impact it would have on our pure Grenada, spice of the Caribbean. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. Mark. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleagues for their support, and they have been in the forefront pushing it. And we know that the Minister for Tourism is behind and with the hotel sector in getting this done, Mr. Speaker. And just to add that the first move, banning an importation, 1st of September 2018, that is the wholesalers and persons that is banned. There must be no importation of this, Mr. Speaker. They will continue to sell, though. But from the first day of March 2019, they should not be selling to vendors anymore. So no more importation, no more selling to the retailers, etc. But the retailers will continue for a while or those people who bought from the retailers, they will have it in their stocks. So you give them a further month, Mr. Speaker, the food places selling things, etc. But they must cease in totality from the first day of April 2019. So this is the order that we're putting in place, Mr. Speaker, approved by the House of Representatives. And we should know that by the 1st of April 2019, we should not have polystyrene products anywhere. In other words, if the wholesalers did not sell all of it, or if the retailers did not sell all to the food restaurants and so forth, it goes. You'll work with the Ministry of the Environment, and if you have any in stock remaining, or how you dispose of it. But you should not walk into a restaurant, and you should not walk out with your polystyrene products covering anything whatsoever, Mr. Speaker. I therefore recommend this motion to this Honorable House.
Honorable members, the question is that pursuant to the provision of Section 3(2) of the Act, that the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Order 2018 be now approved by the House of Representatives. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the Speaker is begged to move the third motion, standing in my name. But before I do so, Mr. Speaker, I think we are aware that the said motion, although circulated later by the Parliament, did not find its way on the supplementary order paper. I therefore crave your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, for your permission for it to be officially so included. It has been circulated. All members have it, Mr. Speaker. And so I wait your concurrence and permission, Mr. Speaker.
All right, Leader of Government Business, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the motion reads, whereas it is provided by Section 3, subsection 2 of the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Act number 9 of 2018, hereinafter referred to as the Act, that the Minister may by order designate non-biodegradable products for the purpose of the Act. And whereas it is provided in Section 3, subsection 2 of the Act that before any such order comes into effect, it shall have been approved by the House of Representatives. And whereas it is now expedient that the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Plastic Bags Order 2018, attached hereto as a schedule, be approved by the House of Representatives, now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to the provisions of Section 3, subsection 2 of the Act, that the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Plastic Bags Order 2018 be now approved by the House of Representatives.
Honorable Representatives. Honorable Representative for St. Mark. Do I see your light blinking there? I saw green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thought there was another step before I requested to speak, but maybe I was in error in that regard. Mr. Speaker, like the previous resolution that was presented, I rise in honor in order to support it very strongly with all my heart, because I believe that is the right way for us to go. Mr. Speaker, I must compliment the persons who, the drafters, the Ministry of Legal Affairs and others, the ministers, who all collaborated to ensure that we got to this point. My only concern is, Mr. Speaker, there's the oversight, the supervision, and the how shall I say, the insistence that whatever has been passed here be executed in quick order and on the dates as specified by the resolution, because sometimes we have a way of extending things and lengthening things, even when we know we're doing that to our detriment. So I just appeal through you, Mr. Speaker, that the zeal with which we pursued the presentation of this bill in cabinet and we pursued this next step, that we employ equal zeal or even more zeal to ensure that what has been passed is enforced in its entirety and effectively and efficiently. Mr. Speaker, I just want to tag onto that quite a while ago we passed the Anti-Litter Act. And up to now, the indiscriminate dumping, the wanton do what you want situation still persists in our state. Only this morning, going into the complex before I came here, right across from, there's a little playground just opposite TAMCC, where they have the produce chemist lab. And this place was littered with styrofoam boxes and other things. So even going further than the legislation is a change in the mindset, a change in custom, a change in the lack of caring for our environment and our people. And maybe put it another positive way, the minister and his ministry with responsibility for our environment, I want to think that we need a lot of re-education on this issue about the importance and the benefits of following some simple basic rules to preserve our country and the detriment that would fall to our people and our generations to come. And sometimes we only look at today. We see what is happening at Perseverance, we see what is happening in other places, but we are pretty healthy. In years to come, these same items that we throw so carelessly without any second thought could have impact on the health of us, on our health, but also on our children's health. And whatever we do in this trial and state, we should always think of the long-lasting impact on our generations to come. And I believe that if our nation gives serious considerations, then the problems we have of littering in the first instance would be abated. And even more so, the problems we have of utilizing materials that are harmful to our health and that are harmful to our environment certainly would be dealt with effectively. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. Mark. Honourable Representative for St. George South.
The timelines set are very lax, should be tighter. Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, the majority of suppliers out there are ready and able to transition sooner. But, Mr. Speaker, we are not just here to represent the majority. We're also here to represent the minority, the smaller suppliers who will need some more time. So while I have a certain level of discomfort in the amount of time that's given, I do recognize that while it is a majority opinion that put us here, the majority vote, once here we must make sure that we look after all, including the minority. And as such, we must give a certain timeline. And I stand and also would like to agree with my colleague from St. Mark's that while we have given this timeline, we must also give ourselves the mandate to ensure, because the timeline is so long, that the enforcement must also be so strong, because we have given everyone enough time to comply. And this is our environment that we're talking about. This is the same conversation of vector control as the Minister of Health. I stand and say vector control, the mosquitoes are breeding in the plastic bags that are thrown out and the styrofoam containers. So before the public cry and demand for fogging in neighborhoods, where there are mosquitoes, there must be the public cry and demand to make sure that we as a people do not litter. So I agree again and support my colleague from St. Mark's in requesting that there be that we further enforce the Litter Act that we passed as well. We are now going to control the type of substances that can be used or littered, but we must still control the littering, Mr. Speaker. So I stand in support of this motion and look forward with my colleagues to re-examining the way that we, one, collect waste, two, control litter, and three, as a people, work together to make sure that we self-regulate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative. Honourable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Just one observation, Mr. Speaker. Because the law says they deal with non-biodegradable, we must never give the impression that it's all right for biodegradable things to be thrown out. And the way people this easily assume that, because you will be punished for non-biodegradable. So the paper bag that is biodegradable is okay to throw it away. We have to cultivate this behavior in people of cleanliness for the environment. That is the substance of what this thing is addressing, not only the food container, because it has certain chemicals that is dangerous, or that it will take 100 years, but about the entire environment that we have to be conscious of as a people, because if you look at what is taking place and the amount of money that had to be spent in cleaning up the environment, this taxpayer money could have been used to pay for more students to go to university, more tuition fees. But we have to use taxpayer money to hire wardens and board environmental wardens to bring on board to clean it. If our people could only control the way that they dispose of garbage, we could use the money in an alternative way. So I don't want the general public to get the impression that because we are talking about non-biodegradable, it is okay for biodegradable products to be thrown anyway. We have to deal with this matter of the way that we dispose of waste. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. David. Honourable Representative for St. George Northwest.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I'm standing in full support of this initiative here. I just want to make the point that was to add to what the member for St. David's just pointed out. The issue is not just about health, it's also about environment and our own behavior patterns that can, in fact, create serious problems for our country and the future generations of our country. A case in point, Mr. Speaker, is that the bus terminus that has become literally a dumping ground for lots of people, including busmen and other citizens in the country. It appears that anytime one has something to throw in St. George's, he or she ends up at the bus terminus and dump it at the back there. This is the center of the cruise ship terminal. We've heard the Minister of Tourism articulated this morning the enormous positive that comes from the tourism industry and the accolades that are coming from visitors. We have to keep this, and we don't want for a person visiting our country walking at that section, and the first thing they see is almost a dump. Not just plastic, all forms of things that are being dumped. And not only that, sometimes the place is being used as a bathroom facility. And this is unacceptable. Whether it's bus driver or persons looking for transport for different parts of the country, whichever it is, Mr. Speaker, we have to be concerned, and we have a responsibility in our country, and not just to deal with issues that may sound popular to us, but sometimes to say the things that are maybe not even popular with some people, because we have a responsibility to the future generations of our country. So I just want to point out, Mr. Speaker, because of the loud cry that we're getting and the information that have reached us, I convened a meeting only this last week with the police commissioner, the chairman of the Port Authority, and the minister responsible for the environment, who are now going to be putting a plan in place and serious implementation to ensure that we clean up that place and we protect it, and ensure that those who break the laws of the land will in fact be punished appropriately. So the Port Authority will have to invest some of its resources to increase the facilities. More bathroom facilities must be necessary, because we can't say we want something done and we have one bathroom facility for hundreds of persons. They have been instructed to do so, and as the minister responsible for the port, I'm sought to indicate this. The police has a small police station. That station must be equipped and of course enough personnel provided to be able to provide that necessary security, and at the same time oversight to ensure that the laws of the land are in fact protected. And at the same time, it would control some behavior patterns, not just environmental, other behavior patterns which are inconsistent with the sort of environment that we want to create at our bus terminus, with young school children. Have to go on a regular basis during the day, going to and from school. So the police would be involved in providing more manpower and support services to the area, and of course the solid waste division under the minister responsible for the environment would also be involved. So we are dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So what we are doing today, Mr. Speaker, is in fact essential, but I want to use that opportunity to underscore a very important thing about how we control our environment and our behavior patterns, which are not necessarily good for future generations of this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleagues for their meaningful and important contributions. To close by saying, Mr. Speaker, that this motion is very similar to the first, the one that you've just done before, with respect to the same Waste Control, Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Act, number 9 of 2018. Mr. Speaker, we mentioned the dates. These have different dates, Mr. Speaker, but I want to remind us or advise that the minister with responsibility for the environment has the authority to add and to remove the items that we deem biodegradable from the list. Of course, every item so removed must come back to the House of Representatives for approval, or any such item added. Mr. Speaker, we know that there are certain groups like the fishermen who export, who have made representation, certain persons, other sector of the economy have made representation, and so we expect that this will be dynamic. However, Mr. Speaker, not because the minister and this House have the authority to change, that we should expect that if you make a request that it will be changed, because we will be defeating the purpose of moving forward with this act and the orders in any case. If you allow one sector to go forward, then there will be the little problem, unless we change our attitude, Mr. Speaker, And it is not good for us all the time to look at external enforcement. We must use our internal suasion to enforce ourselves not to do certain things because we know that it is good and proper, right for the economy, right for our health, right for a future generation to do so, Mr. Speaker. So with respect to the plastic bags, remember the dates, September, March, and April for the polystyrene products. Now for the plastic bags. The dates, Mr. Speaker, they are given a longer time. First, the importer should not do so by the first day of February 2019. Wholesalers should not bring in plastic bags after that period. Then, of course, they'll be selling for a period, and they should cease the sale to the retailers, outlets, by the first day of December 2019. So the outlets, the supermarkets, and the others will have in their stock plastic bags that they can use. But come the first day of February 2020, they should not be giving you the goods and the produce and your groceries in non-biodegradable plastic bags. By that time, I'm sure that the Minister for the Environment and the Ministry will list a certain set of products to advise persons of what is biodegradable. So when you go into the supermarket, when you go into any store, when you go into the market, you should get a biodegradable bag in which you put your produce. So when you come in and you dispose of these, I believe, within 3 or 4 months, it will disintegrate harmlessly into the environment. And so the Ministry of Environment will be helping us to do that, Mr. Speaker. But I want to encourage persons not to keep a source of plastic bags in their homes so that they go to the supermarket with their own plastic bags, etc. And they go to the market with their own non-biodegradable plastic bags, and you still perpetuate the problem of littering, Mr. Speaker. By 2020, when all this is out, just as the wholesalers and the retailers will be working with the Ministry of the Environment to say, well, we have a stock here that was not sold. How do we get rid of it? So too, we in our homes should be working with the Ministry of the Environment to say, I had some that was piling up here, to really use. But some people go on, they put the plastic bags together and they use it other means. But by that time too, even before that time, the homes should be working with the environment to say, here it is. We were looking at it, we're looking at getting rid of it in an environmentally safe manner. And so after 2020, Mr. Speaker, that is the first day of February 2020, Grenada will be free of all plastic, Mr. Speaker. I therefore commend this motion to this Honorable House.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that pursuant to the provision of Section 3(2) of the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Act number 9 of 2018, that the Non-Biodegradable Waste Control Plastic Bags Order 2018 be now approved by the House of Representatives. Honorable members, the question is that this resolution be now approved by the House of Representatives. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Item number 15, bills.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg your permission to rearrange the order of the bills, Mr. Speaker, and to take those in the supplementary order paper for first reading and remaining stages first, Mr. Speaker, and to leave the constitutional amendment bill for the last, Mr. Speaker. I think it will generate a lot of interest, and most members will want to speak on that particular bill, Mr. Speaker. So if you permit us, Mr. Speaker, we will go the extradition government of Grenada and the government of the People's Republic of China Act 2018, Conveyancing and Law of Property Amendment Act 2018, and the Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Treaty, Government of Grenada and the Government of the Republic of China Bill 2018 first, and then we'll take the constitutional motion bill, which is down for its second reading. I ask your permission, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, you have heard the request. That is how it appears on my other paper. So we can proceed with the changing and presentation. Honorable Representative for Carriacou and Petit Martin.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for leave to introduce for the first reading a bill for an act shortly entitled Extradition, Government of Grenada and the Government of the People's Republic of China Act 2018.
A bill for an act to incorporate into the domestic law of Grenada a treaty between the government of Grenada and the government of the People's Republic of China on extradition, shortly entitled Extradition, Government of Grenada and the Government of the People's Republic of China, Bill 2018.
Honorable Representative for Carriacou and Petit Martin.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this particular sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting. Those who are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion, say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of this bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a second time. Honorable Representative for Carriacou and Petit Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to introduce into our domestic law the extradition treaty signed between the government of Grenada and the government of the People's Republic of China. Mr. Speaker, this treaty between the parties was signed on the 24th of March, 2016. And this was in an effort to improve the cooperation, of course, at all levels, between the government of Grenada and the government of the People's Republic of China. Mr. Speaker, it is well known, of course, in international law that a state does not have any obligation to surrender an alleged criminal to a foreign state. Mr. Speaker, this is because of the principle of sovereignty, which states, Mr. Speaker, that every state has a legal authority over the people within its borders. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the absence of international obligations, and of course the desire for the right to demand criminals and other persons from countries have evolved and have come up with a web of extradition treaties. Mr. Speaker, the present treaty between the government of Grenada and the government of the People's Republic of China is a treaty which embodies mutual arrangements made between Grenada and China for the sole purpose of extraditing persons from Grenada to China. However, Mr. Speaker, The signing of the treaty alone is only a preliminary endorsement of the obligations and arrangements therein. It does not create that binding legal obligation on behalf of the parties. As a result, Mr. Speaker, Grenada is now required to take legislative action to make the said treaty legally enforceable and binding in our domestic laws. Mr. Speaker, legal effect will be given to this treaty by the enactment of the extradition treaty, Government of Grenada and the Government of the People's Republic of China Bill 2018. Mr. Speaker, by virtue of Section 3, the said treaty will have the force of law and to provide that legal authority for extraditing persons from Grenada to China pursuant to its obligations assumed by the Government of Grenada under the said treaty when it was signed on the 24th day of March 2016. Mr. Speaker, this treaty is also to be passed in the domestic law of China to ensure that both countries can extradite persons as the case demands. Mr. Speaker, in addition to this treaty, as you know, both countries have been enjoying wonderful and great relationship. And of course, this treaty will also add to that cooperation and friendship existing between both countries. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the Minister of Legal Affairs and her ministry for work well done in ensuring that this legislation is put in place. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that we in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are also very pleased with it. Mr. Speaker, the issue of corruption and dealing with corruption is one that has been extremely important to our Prime Minister Mitchell. It has been important to the government of Grenada. But it has also been a hallmark issue in China with President Xi. President Xi Jinping has also made that one of his primary objectives. So this legislation is not only being passed in Grenada with respect to extradition to China, but it's also in the process of the Chinese government doing the same thing in a week or so in China to have that reciprocal arrangement. And that is because both countries agree, as other countries do, that fighting the scourge of corruption is something that is extremely important. Mr. President, we have confronted many problems in our economy because of this issue, the issue of corresponding banking, regulations in all of the international financial regulations, in all of the corporation, in all of the matters where we have to transact with banks or with governments. This issue is extremely important. In other words, these institutions and these countries want to ensure that we are doing everything in our power, not only to deal with it at a local level, but to cooperate with other countries. And as we cooperate with China, we cooperate with many other countries in dealing with this issue. So it is not only a matter of cooperation with China, which is important. It is a matter of ensuring that we put in place in our legislation everything that indicates to the international community, particularly the international financial community, that we are prepared to deal with these problems. Mr. President, these issues arise sometimes with our CBI program. You know, there's a lot of talk about CBI and persons who are not above board. This legislation here is an indication that we are prepared to do everything to ensure that persons who come in to Grenada, persons who transact business in Grenada, persons who become citizens of Grenada possibly under the CBI program, if it is found that they have done something that is against the law of another country, in this case China, we are prepared to deal with it. Only last year, Mr. President, Grenada cooperated with other Caribbean countries in order to extradite persons not from Grenada, from other countries to China. And the Chinese government, I must say, Mr. President, the Chinese government was extremely pleased. Mr. Speaker, sorry. Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry. Mr. President was sitting here a minute ago. I left his house. I was demoted to this house because his house is the upper house. I do apologize, Mr. Speaker. But the Chinese government, because of that cooperation with the Chinese government a year ago, with removing persons from the Caribbean, other Caribbean countries, we in Grenada used our facilities to assist in that regard. The Chinese government was so pleased with that, Mr. President, and coming out of that, Mr. Speaker, that next week, Monday, we will be hosting the first ever China CARICOM Anti-Corruption Law Enforcement Cooperation Conference. That conference will have in Grenada ministers from all of the CARICOM countries, including some who do not have relations with the People's Republic of China. We will have persons from the Ministry of National Security, persons from the Financial Intelligence Units, persons from the Police Force, Ministers of Home Affairs. And this is the first ever conference in the Caribbean between CARICOM and China to set up a mechanism for cooperation with respect to persons who enter the Caribbean, a business done in the Caribbean, business done in China. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that the CARICOM and China are becoming much closer. And in that regard, mechanisms for cooperation at the security level have become necessary. And that is why we are pleased to announce that this conference is taking place in Grenada, first ever. It is such an important conference that some of the islands have been asking, why Grenada? Why Grenada, Mr. Speaker? Because in Grenada, stable economy, doing well, good cooperation. The People's Republic of China has agreed to have it in Grenada. And our Prime Minister will be opening the conference on Monday morning. So I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that this development, this legislation, as with other pieces of legislation that will be brought before this House, is extremely important, not only for the People's Republic of China to extradite persons who come here who have committed crimes in China. The person I spoke about last year stole $100 million in China and they were returned to China. It is not only important for China, but it is an important piece of legislation for Grenada, both in practical terms. Anybody who does something in China who came from Grenada can be extradited back. But also, it sends a strong signal that our country, led by Dr. Mitchell, will do everything to ensure that the scourge of corruption, to ensure that persons who come into our shores, persons who acquire citizenship, persons who do business in Grenada, will not flee from where they have committed crimes to come to us, and we will do everything to ensure that as we develop, as we attract tons of investment, we want clean, proper investors to this country so that we can develop Grenada CARICOM thematic. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative, for the town of St. George. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too rise in support of the bill as presented by the Minister for Legal Affairs and Representative for Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Mr. Speaker, we have passed in this Honourable House many treaties giving effect to the treaties signed by the government officials, Mr. Speaker. But I want to make one particular point with respect to this treaty, Mr. Speaker. It has all the contents of the international treaties, that is, if you will be extradited for political reasons or if it's a pure military offense, then the requested state can refuse. That is, if the People's Republic of China requests us to expedite a person for these reasons, we can simply say no, and the vice versa, Mr. Speaker. The hallmark, Mr. Speaker, is that whereas other treaties may try to impose upon you things that the other party will want to see, we see this treaty, Mr. Speaker, as far as is permissible by your local laws. So in other words, the requested country, that is Grenada, is given room to say, this is not legal in our system. It may be legal in yours, but we will not respond to you. And the other party has accepted this, Mr. Speaker. So I see here reciprocity, not only the passage of the bills, Mr. Speaker, but in how they treat you, no matter how small you are. You're a sovereign nation. Article 16, Mr. Speaker, mentioned about property, and the member for the town of St. George alluded to it. If, for example, you ask to extradite a certain person for corruption, and maybe that person may have significant sums, it's asked that you put these sums as the items, in whatever form it will be, as evidence, and you will have to send it to the requesting party. But insofar as your local law allows. So if we have a fund under a specific law, which says that all proceeds of crime, and we do have such a bill, Mr. Speaker, the Proceeds of Crime Act. And if the Proceeds of Crime Act dictates that certain sums or certain items should go into something between the registry of the court, then they will no longer say that you should put these things out to me. And the Proceeds of Crime Act says that you can use, the state can use the proceeds under certain circumstances. So it will not be a situation where a certain sum will have to go back for evidence and you will be depriving your fund of certain things, Mr. Speaker. I want to give support to this agreement in general because of its context and its change. Very simple, Mr. Speaker, and it respects the operating law of the states. I recall in certain circumstances where you have a request for extradition, you do encounter a problem later because certain things are not in harmony with respect to your law and with respect to the requesting parties' request to the state. And you're sometimes pushed into making certain amendments to facilitate certain things. I see no such thing in this agreement, Mr. Speaker. And this is one of the reasons why I wish to give total support and to commend this bill to its second reading.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, in standing in full support, of course, of this second reading of this important extradition bill, which, of course, is put forward by the distinguished representative of Carriacou and Petit Martinique Affairs and the Minister of Legal Affairs. I just need to add to some of the things my other colleagues mentioned already, and to underscore the point of the seriousness with which Grenada treats the issue of corruption and general criminal activities, that anyone or everyone should know clearly that if they commit a crime in most countries that we have relationship with and treaty with of this nature, that Grenada would not be the best place to come. Find another hiding place. You would not be the right place to come. You wouldn't be smart at all. And I just want to add this because this is not about today only, Mr. Speaker. Historically, we have been a country of this, has taken this position. I recall way back in the 1990s, as Prime Minister, discussion took place at the regional level, when the countries were being asked to give permission for support from larger countries for searching our waters and helping us to deal with some of the drug activities, knowing that the boats and equipment we have, the guys were literally laughing at us when they found boats attempting to do criminal drug activities in our waters. And I remember there was a strong reservation among regional heads about giving permission. So I remember asking my colleagues, the drug lords have no limitation on how they cooperate. We are putting all sorts of rules in place. This is our sovereign rights and this one sovereign rights. And they're laughing at us. We don't have the equipment, we don't have the resources. Someone is offering us to help us to interdict these people. And we refuse, we almost having strong reservation. And we led that, Mr. Speaker, and the regional leaders, after further deliberation, agreed. And it has worked. In the end, we have got more support from countries like Canada and others who are giving us equipment and providing training for us. All we indicated that we must have personnel from our countries with them to ensure that they're not going against our fundamental rules. But in other words, Grenada is known to be very firm where these issues are concerned. And Mr. Speaker, it is no coincidence, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs alluded to a while ago, about our position on these issues. Do not underestimate Grenada's strong position on issues of criminal nature and extradition of persons committing crimes and getting to here, our jurisdiction. Do not underestimate the fact that the recent announcement of renewal of visas, US visas, for Grenadian citizens for visas already given. In this day and age, when the issue of border security is so prominently displayed around the world, particularly from the United States end, that we have been given, our citizens are being provided with a better and faster opportunity to be able to travel to the United States. And if we search the record, we would have thought that that was given to almost every country in the region. Mr. Speaker, it was given to Grenada. I ask no further questions. So clearly, Mr. Speaker, the image of this country is really something that all of us should be about. It's not about the president, just the present government. It's about all the people of this country. We are benefiting. So all the things that are happening to us, the state of the economy, how we have been promoted around the globe as the poster child for taking steps for fiscal responsibility and calling on every sector of our society to ensure that we all are on the same page in this. No other country have fiscal responsibility act, limiting ourselves of what we can do, and then put in an independent body and say an oversight committee come into Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Which government and which politicians generally speaking over the years and even now are prepared to do this? It is only this government, this country that has gone that far. And we are proud to do it. So I'm convinced that it has a lot to do with the recent announcement. And therefore, when the Minister of Foreign Affairs announced we will use what has happened to go to other country and say if America and Trump could do that, well, we expect you to follow similarly. So, Mr. Speaker, I am proud I am proud, therefore, to support the second reading of this important extradition treaty by a distinguished representative for CARICOM, P.D. Martin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Contributed to the bill, and I commend the bill to its second reading.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read a second time. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Extradition, Government of Grenada and the Government of the People's Republic of China, Bill 2018.
Representative for CARICOM, P.D. Martin.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, we are now in committee.
Clause 2, interpretation.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 2, interpretation, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, treaty to have the force of law.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 3, treaty to have force of law, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 1, short title, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Representative for CARICOM, P.D. Martin.
Mr. Chairman, I now beg that the House resume and that the Chairman of Committee reports progress on the bill.
Honorable members, the question is that the House resumes and the Chairman of Committee reports progress on the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, this Honorable House resumes. I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendments.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Chairman's report be adopted.
The Chairman's report be adopted. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Representative for CARICOM, P.D. Martin. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time. I'm sorry, we missed one. adoption of the report. That the chairman's report be adopted.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the chairman's report be adopted.
Honourable members, the question is that the chairman's report be adopted. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
And Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the third reading of the bill and passage.
Honourable members, the question proposes that the bill be read a third time. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Extradition, Government of Grenada and the Government of the People's Republic of China, Act 2018.
Honourable Representative for Carrico and Pitimati.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for leave to introduce for the first reading a bill for an act shortly entitled Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Treaty, Government of Grenada and the Government of the People's Republic of China Bill 2018.
A bill for an act to incorporate into the domestic law of Grenada a treaty between the Government of Grenada and the Government of the People's Republic of China on mutual legal assistance in criminal matters, shortly entitled Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Treaty, Government of Grenada, Government of the People's Republic of China, 2018.
Honourable Representative for Carrico Pitimati.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting.
Honourable members, the question is that the regular standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable Representative for Carrico Pitimati.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of the bill.
Honourable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a second time. Honourable Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty in Criminal Matters between the Government of Grenada and the Government of the People's Republic of China. That treaty, again, Mr. Speaker, was also signed on the 24th day of March 2016 with a view, Mr. Speaker, to improve the cooperation, the effective cooperation between the two countries in respect of offering mutual legal assistance in criminal matters, of course, on the basis of sovereignty, equality, and mutual benefit. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the provisions of the treaty, the parties are to provide the widest possible legal assistance in criminal investigations, prosecutions, and judicial proceedings in criminal matters. Mr. Speaker, such assistance to include serving of documents of criminal proceedings, taking testimonies or statements from persons, providing documents, records, and articles of evidence, obtaining and providing expert evaluations, locating and identifying persons, conducting inspections or examinations, making persons available for giving evidence or assisting in investigations, transferring persons in custody for giving evidence or assisting in investigations, conducting inquiries, searches, freezing, and seizures, assistance relating to proceeds from criminal activities and instruments of crime, and of course, notifying results of criminal proceedings and supplying criminal records. Mr. Speaker, global groups, individuals, as we know, have wasted no time in capitalizing on today's globalized economy and, of course, the sophisticated technologies that goes with it. With cooperation like this between Grenada and China, Mr. Speaker, I believe that there could be a real impact on the ability of international criminals to operate successfully and to help citizens everywhere in their often bitter struggle to safety and dignity in their own homes and communities. Mr. Speaker, as indicated before, the signing of the treaty that was done on the 24th of March is only a preliminary endorsement of the obligations and arrangements between the two countries. It does not in any way, Mr. Speaker, create any binding legal relations. And hence the reason why, Mr. Speaker, that we are here. Grenada is now required to take legislative action to make the said treaty legally binding between the two parties. So, of course, Grenada can offer that assistance to China, and China, in return, can offer same assistance, providing that the need arise. Mr. Speaker, the legal effect, of course, will be given to this treaty by the enactment of the Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Treaty, Government of Grenada, and the Government of the People's Republic of China, Bill 2018. Mr. Speaker, by virtue of Section 3, the said treaty will have the force of law, and that, Mr. Speaker, will provide the legal authority for giving legal assistance, as indicated before, in criminal matters pursuant to the obligations assumed by the Government of Grenada under the said treaty. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for Carrickwood, Peter Martin. Not only General, Honourable Representative for for Tongue of St. George. I'm transferring you.
I do, Mr. Speaker, have some Carrickwood heritage, so you wouldn't be entirely wrong. I just don't represent the people there this time. So, Speaker, again, I just want to stand to support this bill. And to reiterate something that was said earlier by the member for Southeast St. George with respect to sovereignty. Because sometimes people would hear, we're extraditing people to China. It also says China will extradite people to Grenada if we need them for some criminal activity in Grenada. But mostly, the member said that it in no way binds us to do anything that would violate our own laws or something that we believe is not in the interest of Grenada. So, one of the pillars of our relationship with all countries is respect for our sovereignty, because despite our size, we are a sovereign nation, as independent as every other nation. As you would see when we come on to discuss CCJ, it is one of the things that we insist that we are independent, sovereign country. And one of the pillars, particularly in the relationship with the People's Republic of China, one of the pillars we have is that we both respect both sovereignty and our internal political system. Nothing done here will affect our political arrangements in our country, and China will respect ours, we will respect theirs. So I just wanted to reiterate that point. I thought it was a very important point raised by the member for Southeast. With respect to a point made by the member for Carriacou, which is again important in this regard, the fact that we are having investors coming to Grenada from China, both individual investors and major corporate investors as China Harbor, means that they would want to know that there's a certain level of certainty in the judicial system. One of the pillars of any economy is a proper judicial system, particularly where there may be lawsuits, there may be criminal activity. So I think what this does, Mr. Speaker, is to, in addition to the other areas of cooperation with the People's Republic of China, this brings a certain level of certainty a certain level of predictability in the relationship with the investors coming into the country, the Chinese coming to our country, what they will face when they get to Grenada. So I'm just saying, Mr. Speaker, I rise to support it and to commend the Minister for Legal Affairs, the member for Kairaku and Pitimartik for the work done in this regard. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for the Tongue of St. George, Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member of the House for his contribution and, of course, for supporting the bill and commend the bill to its second reading.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters bill be read a second time. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. Think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Treaty, Government of Grenada and the Government of the People's Republic of China Act 2018.
Honourable Representative for Kairaku and Pitimartik.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honourable members, the question is that this Honourable House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, we are now in committee.
Clause 2, interpretation.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 2, interpretation, forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion say aye. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, treaty to have the force of law.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 3, treaty to have the force of law, forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 1, short title, forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable Representative, Kairaku and Pitimartik.
Mr. Chairman, I now beg that the House resume and that the Chairman of Committee reports progress on the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that this Honourable House now resumes and the Chairman of Committee reports progress on the bill. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, the House resumes. I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendment. Honourable Representative for Kairaku and Pitimartik.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Chairman's report be adopted.
Honourable members, the question is that the Chairman's report be adopted. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable Representative for Kairaku and Pitimartik.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the third reading of the bill and its passage.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a third time. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Treaty, Government of Grenada and the Government of the People's Republic of China Act 2018.
Honorable Representative for Carriacou and Petit Martinique.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to introduce for the first reading the bill for an act shortly entitled Conveyancing and Law of Property Amendment Bill 2018.
A bill for an act shortly to amend the Conveyancing and Law of Property Act Cap 64, shortly entitled Conveyancing and Law of Property Amendment Bill 2018.
Honorable Representative for Carriacou and Petit Martinique.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that the regular standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting. Those who have that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Representative for Carriacou and Petit Martinique.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of the bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a second time. Those who have that opinion say aye. Sorry. Honorable Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the provisions of the Conveyancing and Law of Property Act, Grenada adopts an unregistered system of conveyancing to establish title to land. Now, under this system, Mr. Speaker, one proves ownership to property by their title documents, the title deeds. Mr. Speaker, in transactions relating to sale of land, for instance, under the unregistered system of conveyancing, a vendor now has to show a good root of title or an unbroken chain of title of at least 60 years. This means, Mr. Speaker, that one has to commence his or her search as far back as 60 years. So, for instance, Mr. Speaker, let's say that a vendor has a title deed that is dated 2018. That search now has to be commenced and has to go all the way back to the year 1958 to present. And that period, Mr. Speaker, has to be searched to show an unbroken chain of title by the title deeds. This period, Mr. Speaker, is not in accordance with the Principal Act, but rather same is in accordance with common law practices. Our deeds and land registry here in Grenada, Mr. Speaker, contain copies of various deeds registered, time and time again, from which, Mr. Speaker, these searches are conducted. Mr. Speaker, as a consequence of the tremendous searches to be done and the amount of searches that takes place at our lands and deeds registry, most of the index books containing that information as it relates to deeds that were registered some 60 years back have become dilapidated. There are numerous complaints, Mr. Speaker, as it relates to index and pages that are missing, and it is at times, Mr. Speaker, inconclusive. Mr. Speaker, other countries, other CARICOM countries, such as Dominica and Trinidad, have enacted legislation such as this, stipulating a shorter period for conducting searches and to determine that good root of title, rather than relying on the common law principle or the common law period of 60 years. For instance, Mr. Speaker, in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, the period is 20 years. In the case of Dominica, the period is 30 years. Mr. Speaker, several attempts have been made in the past to rectify some of the situation that exists at our deeds and land registry. For instance, Mr. Speaker, many of the indexes, we rewrite them. We have inserted new transactions into computer systems. However, Mr. Speaker, these efforts have proven to be inadequate with the mounting challenges that we now have with some of the records at the deeds and land registry. Mr. Speaker, it is contemplated that by reducing the number of years from 60 to 30, that we will be able to enhance the present situation at the deeds and land registry, and at the same time, Mr. Speaker, maintain the integrity of the system. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that since 20th August 1999, we have a current duplicate recording system, and that system is now in place, which system, Mr. Speaker, have produced and continue to produce improvements in the records available for searches. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, the Conveyancing and Law Property Amendment Bill 2018 seeks only to insert a new section to the Principal Act, Section 39, to stipulate the period of 30 years as a period of search needed in order to determine the good root of title, instead, Mr. Speaker, of the 60-year period as required by common law practices. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for Carriacou P.T. Martini. Honourable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Speaker, I stand here to give my full support to this amendment. But, Mr. Speaker, there are certain realities that we need to deal with. If you go to the registry of lands, so to search, so I don't know how they get in any record there now. You see the state of the books and so on, to go and do this search. Of course, title is important, but the law says there must be an unbroken chain. The link of title must go back to 60 years. Remember, we have suffered a hurricane, Major Ivan, today. Says for which cause damages to it. So I think what we have to move in these days of technology, we really have to change the system and make it modernized so that we could easily conduct the searches. So I still think this amendment, well, I appreciate the time I have, but it does not address the real problem. It does not address the real problem. We need to computerize our system, put it in modern forms. Because title, of course, you go to the bank and they want to ensure that you really have proper title for the thing in order to give you a mortgage. So you have to go back, way back, searching, because unless you have proper title, the financial institution would not honor the document. So I see we follow Dominic by 30 hours. Just wondering if we shouldn't set the bar a little higher and say 20. Got find a lot of years to give him a whole thing. No, I'm serious, Mr. Speaker. One of 40, the other one 30. And in Grenada, we are known for taking measures, bold measures to correct our situation. Over the last 5 years, you see what the turnaround in the economy was because of bold measures we took, Mr. Speaker. So we are known for that. So we could even improve on this 30 years. But it's a good start. It's a good way to start. We computerize the system, we go to the 30. But we also did, Mr. Speaker, we call the possessory title, right? After 12 years. It's 12 years, right? That you could, if you lived on the property and nobody claimed, after 12 years, you could make application to get it. That is all in the effort of dealing with this important matter of giving, giving title to landholders. Because if you have title and you bring it in your deed, you go get to a financial institution and they honor it, that is what will empower you. If you're just living on the land and you have no title and you cannot get a financial institution to honor it, then you're still in the same position. But if you could get title and use it, that could help improve your lifestyle because you can get loans and so on. So these two pieces of bill, the possessory title, which allows you to make a statutory declaration and go to a court and so on, and this here amendment to reduce it to 30 years is really welcome, and I think for the ordinary citizens, they will welcome this amendment to the law, and therefore I give my full support to this amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. David. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my full support to the bill as presented from the member for Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Mr. Speaker, when they first saw the proposal to reduce the bill from 60 years to 30 years, I did ask my colleague, if we are sure. It came back, Mr. Speaker, from while studying in Canada. I listened to the case between the Native Indians of Canada and the Canadian government, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the lands and the privileges that they have. And I heard and saw on the TV where they went to the records in the 1700s and pulled the first deed signed by Her Majesty then, and looked at titles going back out. And even in those times, I realized what colonialism is all about. Some lands were given to the Indian, some were given to Her Majesty's representative in the area. So that triggered my intellect, Mr. Speaker, and my whole mind as to see what land titles really refer to. Right down the line, Mr. Speaker. So then when we said we were moving from 60 to 30, I said, wow, suppose something went wrong there. And the Indians were able to claim the land because even if certain other persons came back, the title was not good. Because if Her Majesty gave it to it, you must buy it legally, etc. So you can't just go on it as some of the incomers to the Canadian country, to the country of Canada did at a point in time. But looking at the reality, Mr. Speaker, and looking at what is there, as the member for St. David said, you could go to look for after year 35 or 40, you're just searching, maybe charging the people for the search, but there's nothing to see. And that is what, Mr. Speaker, tipped my balance over. Yes, we must move and make this a reality. So whether or not something is wrong with the title, whether or not somebody got the land improperly 40 years ago, we would not know. So keeping the integrity, while 20 years will be okay and increase the ease of doing business because some persons come to Grenada and they want the land title quickly and you just go to 20 years and you see it so you could move and put on a big building, etc. And then you may find, the question I asked, what happened when you go back to 35 years and you found if somebody went back to 35 years, even if the law in place, yes, it will be legal, but then you'll start to have questions. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? Going back 35 years, there's nothing. Going back 36 years, you might see a page that you can't read. And as you raise it up, it shatters in your hand like a windscreen. Nothing there. So then I said, yes, we must do better. While we will computerize, and we have started the process, and we'll move with the unregistered and the registered system starting now. We must start somewhere. I am convinced, Mr. Speaker, that we need to take out what could be termed a waste anytime you go back after 35 years and so forth. So then, Mr. Speaker, I was moved to the inclination to say that we have to do something. And in that context, Mr. Speaker, we've been, yes, improving the rate of doing business, but at the same time, we'll be ensuring that the property does not end up in a wrong hand because, well, it end up in a correct hand because such a person will be paying, but he'll be buying from somebody who did not have proper title. But I believe that 35 years, we cannot solve that. We will not be any wiser if we go back past the 30 years because there's nothing there to see. I think a lot of us, Mr. Speaker, should go to the registry and see what is going on. And the paralegals searching, every day they bombard you. They complain merely to the lawyers and to the Minister for Legal Affairs and to the Ministry of Legal Affairs, but they also complain to other representatives that they search. They're paid to search. And what are they searching for? Things that they cannot touch. So, Mr. Speaker, I fully support the bill as proposed.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. George Southeast. Honourable Representative for Carrick-Wempity-Bartley.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the members of the House who have contributed and supported this bill, and I commend the bill to its second reading.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a second time. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Conveyancing and Law of Property Amendment Act 2018.
Honourable Representative for Carrick-Wempity-Bartley.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honourable members, the question is that this Honourable House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, we are now in committee.
Clause 2, insertion of new section 39 of Principal Act.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 2 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title and commencement.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 1, short title and commencement, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable Representative for Carrick-Wempity-Bartley.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that the House resumes and the Chairman of the Committee reports progress on the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that the House resumes and the Chairman of Committee reports progress on the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendment. Honourable Representative for Carrick-Wempity-Bartley.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Chairman's report be adopted.
Honourable members, the question is that the Chairman's report be adopted. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable Representative Okai Martinique.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the third reading of the bill and pass.
Honourable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a third time. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Conveyancing and Law of Property Amendment Act 2018.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the first reading of the bill, Constitution of Grenada, Caribbean Court of Justice, and renaming of Supreme Court Amendment Act 2018 was done in this honorable house, Mr. Speaker, some 90-something days ago. This is in accordance with the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, that at least 90 days must elapse between the first reading of the bill in the House of Representatives and its second reading. This is to give the general public, because we're now trying to amend the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, enough time to look at the bill, to bring the representation in so that members will have a clear idea of the feeling of the bill. And for such an important exercise to be taken after a lot of input would have been had, Mr. Speaker. This bill, Mr. Speaker, could be termed the CCJ bill, as is commonly known. Mr. Speaker, the final Court of Appeal of Grenada and other territories, former colonies of the United Kingdom, is a Privy Council. And we are now advocating, Mr. Speaker, that we should change from the Privy Council to the Caribbean Court of Justice. And the Caribbean Court of Justice, Mr. Speaker, has been established by agreement in the Treaty of CARICOM. And we are already using this court in its first jurisdiction, that is how to interpret the Treaty of Chaguaramas. And only a couple of days ago, Mr. Speaker, at the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on the CSME, a lot of members vented there, Mr. Speaker, because certain things were not being done at the level of trade, the common market. Certain member countries did not want to import the other stuff. These are things that the Caribbean Court of Justice will determine and make a resolution on, and make a judgment, a ruling on. But this same court, Mr. Speaker, that is already in practice, this is the court that we want to subscribe to as our final court to replace the Privy Council. And Mr. Speaker, over the many years, we have been advocating for such a court. Its benefits have been articulated time and time again, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure members will refer to the benefits of acceding to the Caribbean Court of Justice, Mr. Speaker. But we here, Mr. Speaker, must pass this bill with a two-thirds majority, that is 10 members, must vote yes if we must advance to the next stage of the constitutional amendment, which is to go to a referendum. We have announced the date jointly with Antigua and Barbuda as the 6th of November. But if only 9 members say yes now, Mr. Speaker, then we cannot reach to that stage, and there will be no referendum. This is the importance of the bill, Mr. Speaker. Justice for our citizens, the breaking of all ties, becoming more and more independent. There are some who say that no country is independent in this global world, but some are more independent than others. At least we'll be climbing the ladder, Mr. Speaker, and we'll be working in an environment with a Caribbean culture where justice will be accepted and seen to be done in a manner, and where people will have more access to the Caribbean court, Mr. Speaker. There are many clauses here, Mr. Speaker, that I'm sure members will go into separately. But I simply want to commend this bill to its second reading. Now, Mr. Speaker, and hope and believe that we will get the two-thirds majority, Mr. Speaker. This is a parliament, Mr. Speaker, not because all of us may come from the same backdrop, but this transcends political affiliation, Mr. Speaker. And so all of us will be talking, representing our various constituencies as the Constitution and the law require us to do. So all of us will make our contribution, and I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, we'll hear tremendous benefits that this thing can bring us. A lot of it are already on the radio, a lot of it already in the paper. We had a great forum, Mr. Speaker, some Wednesdays back. And so the public is well aware. Mr. Speaker, I wish, therefore, to commend this bill for its second reading and to exhort our members to give the frank opinion and hopefully, at the end, the total support for its second reading. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill, Constitution of Grenada, Caribbean Court of Justice and Renaming of Supreme Court Amendment Act 2018 be read a second time. Honorable Representative Forsyth Monk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in full support of the bill as presented by the member for St. George Southeast. Mr. Speaker, as said by the member, this bill was presented before, but it is a bill that has to be voted on in the next few weeks ahead, and I expect a lot of debates will be held in local villages and so on. But I think it behooves us to make our contribution in this honorable house, which is the highest institution in this land. Mr. Speaker, since I expect many of us will be speaking, I will limit my contribution on one or two specific issues. I have been informed by the committee who's dealing with the CCJ that this was the bill most voted on in the referendum. Whether it was yea or nay, it was most voted on, which means that is the bill of significance to our country. I firmly believe that not enough education and information was done, because perhaps I believe if it was, that might have been the only bill that would have succeeded to get the 66 and 2/3%. And I believe that this is the optimal time for us to right that shortcoming in terms of bringing information to our people, explaining to them what the issues are, and listening to their disquiet. Mr. Speaker, I believe that if the facts are known to the people, that they would have no hesitation in voting maybe 100% or 90%, not just the 66 and 2%, but a big percentage unanimously for this bill. And I will give my reasons why. Mr. Speaker, in speaking to people about Privy Council versus CCJ, one of the first things that I raise and what comes to my mind is how much of a choice do we have with the Privy Council? How long is it going to be there supporting us? British government paying their money for an institution that they do not use. How long are they going to support it financially and otherwise to support us? We have seen that many things have been taken away from us. I'm coming here, you look at the Governor General's building. In St. George, we have an eyesore, the Parliament building. Those were destroyed by Hurricane Ivan. We never got support to replace them up to today by the government where the Privy Council is, the government of which we were a colony for the longer period of time, although we were in the hands of the French and so on for a little while, but we were there and they have not. And that should send a strong message to us that the Governor General is the direct servant of the Queen. The Parliament building, we pay homage to the Queen. And yet, when those buildings were destroyed and several requests were made, I know that for a fact, they never bothered with us. Do these people, are they really interested in us? Do they really care that much about us? This is a question we have to ask ourselves. And if the answer is that they do not, then we ought to know that at some point in time, they will relinquish that hold, that support, that string that ties us to still the colonialism. And as the member for St. George Southeast said, we're never fully independent, but we're on a pathway. And therefore, as we move forward in that pathway, we have to look at the things that are not in our favor, that do not benefit us, and move forward to eradicate them, and to look at what is better for us and move forward to implement them. So that's my first question. How much interest do they have in this thing for us? And then I asked, I've been in a couple of meetings, and I asked people, how many of you know about the Privy Council? Put your hand up. I did not see one hand go up. The ordinary man on the street doesn't know about the Privy Council. And why? Because it has not been accessible to us. We have not been able to use it. It is not an avenue for us, so why should we bother? So they don't know about it. And that is very, very telling. If we were to just ask people, how much do you know about the CCG? And if we could get the 66 and 2/3, if by doing that we could have resolved the matter, we would have resolved the matter very easily, because we do not know about them, because we do not use them, and we have no avenues to go to them. Very, very few. And I say no, and perhaps I say it in that strong way, and we do know a few cases have gone few and far between, with a lot of difficulties, and sometimes the verdicts that are given makes one wonder, and I'm not a legal person by any measure, but sometimes the judgments may not necessarily be to reflect an understanding of our people. So that brings us to the next question. Do they know us? Do they understand us? Our language, our culture, our way of dealing with things. Do these things factor into their decision making when it concerns our people? And I think the answer is no. So, Mr. Speaker, these are some of the things that we have to consider. And the other thing with the CCJ, the Caribbean, the CARICOM, we are one space, one people, one sea, and pretty much one destiny. Because what affects one Caribbean region, one CARICOM country, affects all of us. And over the years, history has shown that some of the things we have done, either as a sub-region, as the Eastern Caribbean, there have been several successes. And as a region, I mean, we couldn't talk about West Indies cricket without a Caribbean community. I don't know if Grenada could have put up a cricket team that would have gone to play with England and play Australia and India, so on. I doubt very much. And while we have done excellently in some areas where individual input is required, when it requires numbers and economies of scale, we depend heavily on our CARICOM partnership or CARICOM relationship. And a number of good things have happened. So, and even as a sub-region, as a physician and as former Minister for Health at one time, we had a lot to do within the OECS, looking at how we could have access to medication for our people, how we could cut costs, and we did it best by coming together, some 13 countries or so, to deal with that. So there is safety in numbers in the region. And Mr. Speaker, the last contribution I want to make, because I know others will make their contribution. The last contribution I want to make is that we have very skilled people who have reached up the highest level. I remember going to Canada, and one of the most renowned judge at the time in Canada, that was quite a few years ago, was a Grenadian. And as we were told a few days ago in presentations that were done in the launch of the CCJ, our Caribbean lawyers have reached to the highest level, even in the same Privy Council. So sometimes we feel that what we have is not good enough. And I just want to leave one old statement. I'm winding down, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker. Where did I get the president from? Mr. Speaker, I'm winding down now. There's an old saying, and the younger ones around this table who do not know it, I'll have to give them a little homework to do. And it is slough say slough. Slough say slough. And our people must learn their part. But the only thing is, I'm sorry I have to say what it means, because it wouldn't give impact to how I'm going to end. Slough say slough, and they'll have to pay me later on for that edifying. It says, yours is yours. Yours is yours. And we must not underestimate those sayings our people had. Yours is yours. Privy Council is not ours. No matter what we do, what we say, no matter what ties we had to England, this is the time to keep divesting ourselves of those strings that tie us unnecessarily. That doesn't mean we'll break all ties. As independent countries, we still have relationship with England. We'll still welcome the Queen, and so when they come to Grenada, I hope they will welcome me when I go to England, but they never have. But the point is, there are some ties that are not beneficial to us as a country and a people. They do not create the avenues. They do not give the exposure to our people as they need our support. And therefore, we have to look what is more meaningful. I am sure they're listening to that debate somewhere, somebody listening and say, kudos, it's time for Grenada to move forward, just as other countries are moving. So they're happy over there because it's better for them, and they know it is better for us. So, Mr. Speaker, I rest my case because I know others want to speak. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative, and that a good lesson in patois would be helpful to us. Slough say slough, slalot blah slough. I would come in there to help. Honourable Representative for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my full support to this bill. But, Mr. Speaker, in doing so, I want to beg your indulgence to read from the website, the homepage of the Privy Council, how it describes itself to the world. And I quote, "The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council is the court of final appeal for the UK overseas territories and Crown dependencies, and for those Commonwealth countries that have retained appeal to Her Majesty in Council." By its own description on its own website, Mr. Speaker, the Privy Council describes itself as a vestige of colonial times. I quote, "For those Commonwealth countries that have retained appeal, therefore there is a choice. And with that choice, there is an expectation that you could and would move further, that you could still be Commonwealth, very much Commonwealth, and have not retained the appeal to Her Majesty. Her Majesty is still the head of state, but we have Her Majesty's prison, but it is our people that are looking after it. We have Her Majesty's customs, but it is our people that are running it. We have Her Majesty's police, it is our people. We have this fine house, it is our people. And it is time, with respect to judicial matters, that the Court of Final Appeal should be our people, a Caribbean Court of Final Appeal. Mr. Speaker, I am one of the few Grenadians who has gone to the Privy Council. And I can tell you it is extremely expensive. And on one occasion, that contemplation, that expense came into consideration, and you contemplated not going to appeal even though you knew you were correct and that justice was not served. Not because of what was right or wrong, but because of how much it would cost. And once you contemplate that, then it is not correct. You cannot have a system where an individual, to prove their innocence or their right, the cost to do so comes into consideration and would prevent them from proving what is right or ensuring what is their right. Mr. Speaker, I give a point in case right now, and my learned brother from the town of St. George would probably be aware of this too. The UK, United Kingdom, is where the Privy Council sits. The United Kingdom has laws, its own domestic laws, which states that individuals who have been convicted of drug offenses will not be allowed entry into the United Kingdom. And that is their right. But what this means with respect to what we are discussing here today is that an individual, Guyanese, need visas to go to the UK. Tomorrow morning, the UK could decide on their own that Grenadians do. But if an individual who has been convicted of a drug offense in Grenada or in any Caribbean island would like to appeal that conviction because they believe they have been wrongly convicted, they cannot go to the Court of Final Appeal because the country in which that Court of Final Appeal resides says you can't come. That if that country for a different reason, if the UK for a different reason decides that a certain lawyer, no matter how learned and qualified, who is representing a Grenadian, they don't want him in the UK, then that lawyer, no matter how learned and qualified, cannot go to defend a Grenadian or to appeal a judgment in the United Kingdom, because that's where this Court of Final Appeal resides right now. It does not, like our first Court of Appeal, travel throughout the islands to accommodate those who cannot get there, so that cost would not be a significant factor. It does not. It stays there and says, you come to me. But however, in order to get there, you've got to meet the conditions of an independent nation, the United Kingdom. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to contemplate the world we're living in today, where we are seeing change in immigration laws, while we are working hard as a government and making sure, wherever possible, as was announced earlier today, that those changes are positive for us wherever possible. It is not a far stretch of the imagination with Brexit that the UK could change its immigration policy with respect to the former colonies. And it would be harder for Grenadians, Grenadian lawyers, or Grenadians who needed to appeal a case to get to that court. Mr. Speaker, finally, I want to make a comment. I've heard others who have certain reservations on what we are contemplating speak to the state, current state, physical state of some of our courts here in Grenada, and that being a concern of theirs as to having the CCJ. But that should not be a concern for two reasons. One, the CCJ has its fund guaranteed already in its setup. Money was put aside for the CCJ operations so that it would be independent of the government, so that it would function properly. And basically, the annual cost of the CCJ is the interest on that fund that has been put aside. So it's not just diminishing amounts. CCJ has its money put aside and will be well looked after to serve the people with or without the progress of this government or any of the other governments that sign on. So it's not a valid reason for that. In fact, it's a justification to move to a system that already has its resources guaranteed, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe it is quite appropriate, quite timely for us to be considering this, for us to be considering what is in the best interest of our people, and to make sure that those who need to appeal a judgment, that it is more appropriate, it is more local, it is more accessible, it is more understanding, it is more Grenadian, it is more Caribbean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative. Honourable Representative for St. Patrick West.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make my contribution to the debate on what we can refer to as the CCJ bill. Mr. Speaker, not long from now, I think the 6th of November, we as citizens of this country will be called upon to vote in a referendum to determine whether Grenada should accede to the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction, knowing full well, Mr. Speaker, that we are part of the CCJ, a member of the CCJ, in its original jurisdiction, being the court that will interpret the Treaty of Chaguaramas on all the various agreements, and to determine whether there are violations to such revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. So the CCJ, Mr. Speaker, should not be seen as something that is new to us. We are only looking at it in its appellate jurisdiction. Mr. Speaker, not long ago, but 2 days ago, 2 evenings ago, I was part of a team holding discussions in the village in Hermitage where the issue of the CCJ was raised. And Mr. Speaker, I want to make this point, and the member for St. George Southeast said we should be frank in our presentation, and I will be frank. Mr. Speaker, if what transpired there could be seen as a microcosm of the entire country, I must indeed say that we have a lot of work to do between now and the 6th of November to convince our people to vote in this referendum. Because, Mr. Speaker, I have a guess that close to 90% of our people do not know much about the CCG. Because that same 90% do not see themselves as making use of the CCJ in a lifetime. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, they will want to know how the CCJ will benefit them. That's the number one concern. Yes, you asked me to be part of the CCJ. You want me to vote for it. How will the CCJ benefit me? For the Rasta man who is sitting on the block and is feeling aggrieved because he was arrested, criminalized for a little thing, he will want to know, why am I voting for the CCJ? For that vendor whose son has been languishing in prison on remand and cannot have his case called or heard, you're asking me, why should I vote? You're asking me to vote for the CCJ. Why? Where's the justice? Or for that young man, Mr. Speaker, who was injured in that accident, not his fault. And for years, Mr. Speaker, he has been waiting for his matter to be heard so he can get just compensation, and he's not getting it. You're asking me, why am I voting for the CCJ? Mr. Speaker, the issue is that we have to convince our people. We have to reach out there, Mr. Speaker. And yes, in this parliament, it's good. We could speak, we could talk about the CCJ, but we have to go out there, Mr. Speaker, in the trenches. It's like a one-on-one combat to convince the people as to why they should vote for the CCJ. Mr. Speaker, man is a creature of habit. We know that. They've been hearing about the Privy Council. Sometimes they don't even know what is the Privy Council, but they hear about it. And we know that our people are resistant to change. They resist change. For obvious reasons, maybe out of ignorance, they do not know. So they prefer to stay on the safe side, quote unquote. Or some again might resist because of political expediency. Now that they may not know, but for political reasons, they might want to oppose. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we have a task as educators, as those who are proposing that we move from the Privy Council to the CCG. We have, as we say, a humongous task on our hands to convince our people to move in that direction. But, Mr. Speaker, what is significant, the same people, ordinary people, who are saying that they do not know about the CCJ, they are indifferent as to whether it's the CCJ or the Privy Council. These are the same people, Mr. Speaker, who are crying out for lack of justice in our judicial system, at the level of the Magistrate Court, to the High Court, and even to the OECS Court of Appeal. That is where, Mr. Speaker, the issue lies. That is where, Mr. Speaker, they feel the injustice. Not at the Privy Council. They don't know about the Privy Council, or maybe why the CCJ will replace it. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, unless we can convince those people that with the CCJ, maybe justice could come at that level, still, get them to change their minds. They must see the CCJ, Mr. Speaker, as being able to influence justice at that level. There must be what they call a trickle-down effect of the CCJ. And in our process of educating the people, Mr. Speaker, that is what we have to show them. And I'll raise some other points. But to me, that is the most critical issue, that the CCG must be seen to them as being some kind of hope that there will be justice, ultimately, for the ordinary people, Mr. Speaker. If we can't do that, we will not be able to convince them to vote, because they do not see the CCG as being of any assistance to them, because they don't know about it. Mr. Speaker, I might be a bit controversial in my presentation, but so be it. But I think, as the speaker said, that the member said, we have to be frank. And we will be frank. Mr. Speaker, several reasons have been advanced, and justifiably so, by members of the committee as to why we should accede to the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction. And these are all valid reasons, Mr. Speaker. I don't think anyone could fault some of the reasons advanced. But we cannot see all of these reasons as being foolproof, as being tight, as being not debatable. And we have to be open. We have to be frank with the people, Mr. Speaker, that although there might be strong reasons for moving in a certain direction, they must know the limitations as well and the weaknesses that exist, so they could make up their minds. Because our role is to educate them. They must be educated. They must know the pros and the cons, and let them make a determination. Although we may have a duty in the long run, based on our own conviction as to how we feel they should move. Mr. Speaker, it bothers me as a region that only 4 countries so far have signed up to the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction: Dominica, Barbados, Guyana, and Belize. 4 countries. And after 17 years, Mr. Speaker, we have to answer why. What are the reasons the other countries have not yet acceded to the CCJ? There are very valid reasons, but we should know. The people should know. The CCJ is headquartered in Trinidad and Tobago. That's where the headquarters of the CCJ. The first Chief Justice of the CCJ is a Trinidadian, Justice Dilabert State. But yet, Trinidad and Tobago is not a member of the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction. Question should be asked. Why is Trinidad and Tobago? You have the CCJ located there, you're not a member. There might be valid reasons, Mr. Speaker, but the people should know. And for other countries, a strong case was made when it was said that the CCJ will move swiftly. The CCJ will move swiftly because of its advanced technology. Quite true. And we talk about the Ventus case with in the election in Barbados. And it was able to get swift results. But someone could say, hey, there was a case in St. Kitts and Nevis, and they went to the Privy Council and they got quick result as well. And that changed the course of history in St. Kitts. And could that be the reason why that country is not moving to the CCJ? Because of the swift response to a matter that would have seen a different result to the election in that country? Could it be that reason? So there might be individual reasons. Countries might present different reasons why they are not moving in the direction of the CCG when we all know that for us, Mr. Speaker, this is the direction we should go. So let us know. Mr. Speaker, one of the greatest fears of our people with regard to the CCG is that of the possibility of political interference. And I must commend the architects of the CCG for putting in place adequate mechanisms to ensure that political interference will be minimal or don't exist at all. But you cannot say, and I will not support anyone saying that the Privy Council, well, let's put it that way, that let's go to the CCG because the possibilities of political interference will be lower than that of the Privy Council. No, it can't be. It just can't be. The fact is that, Mr. Speaker, the CCG has adequate mechanisms to ensure that political interference, which our people are concerned about, and again, it is not, that concern is not grounded in reality, but it's just that perception that we are a small community, everybody knows each other, so the politicians will interfere. But we know as a fact, Mr. Speaker, that because of the way the CCJ will be funded and the way that judges will be appointed, it's almost entirely removed the politicians in terms of interference. And unlike appointing judges now by the legal commission, where you require unanimous agreement among all of the leaders to appoint the president, it is not so with the CCJ. So it is an improved model, much improved, but yet that perception exists. How do we get our people to abolish that perception of non-interference? It is a task. It's a task we have to educate. But I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, this is something we should not take lightly. Mr. Speaker, another point that was raised in support of the CCJ, which I fully agree to, is that the whole issue of our culture. CCJ will be, it's a Caribbean thing, so okay, it will be more au fait with cultural norms and practices of our people. Quite correct. Because I've heard it said that, listen, with that CCG, now with the Privy Council, there are certain practices that we may regard as taboo or unacceptable to our region. That if you go to the Privy Council, someone decides to take a matter to the Privy Council. Let us take, for example, same-sex marriage. Someone decides, hey, they want to, that is something that is not, that's alien to us. And generally, we will not support it, yeah? That's my basic principle. But someone might say, hey, I will test it. You refuse me, and I'll take it all the way to the Privy Council. And the Privy Council will say, based on its liberal nature, will say, hey, yes, you have to. You have to or you have to. It's a ruling that we have to accept. And that, for me, that could be dangerous. But it is not only the Privy Council, Mr. Speaker, that could do that. Some of the treaties, the agreements, the conventions that we do sign now as governments, there might be certain clauses in them that say, hey, if you want my aid, you have to pass legislation that will support the same thing that you don't want us to do. Are we going to refuse it? Do we have the moral strength? Do we have that economic independence to say, hey, we will refuse your aid because we do not want, we will not be part of what you want us to do? That's a practice, Mr. Speaker. That's something we have to be careful about. We have to be careful about. So it's not just the Privy Council that might do it. But because we cannot resist that temptation, we might sign certain treaties, certain conventions, but there are clauses that bind us to that, Mr. Speaker, and we have to be very careful with that too. Mr. Speaker, as I said, most of the reasons given for us joining the CCJ, I fully support. Knowing some of the weaknesses that exist in that, which we should know. But, Mr. Speaker, there are three fundamental reasons why I give my full support to the CCJ. And they are not, I should say, totally reflective of those that I have advanced already. The first, and the member for St. Mark alluded to it en passant. Mr. Speaker, the CCJ is our thing. To use the word slough, slay, slough. It is ours, Mr. Speaker. And when something is yours, Mr. Speaker, you have to adapt it. It's yours. What else? You create it and you want to throw it away? There will be limitations, there will be weaknesses, but it is the creature of our own creation. It is a Caribbean institution, Mr. Speaker, that we are creating. And the Caribbean region, Mr. Speaker, is known for creating very powerful institutions in the past. And I want to make reference to two. Again, the member for St. Mark made reference to one. West Indian cricket, something that glued our region together, Mr. Speaker. There were times when West Indies ruled the cricketing world. We were the pinnacle, defeated every other country. And you know the English had a saying at one time, they prefer to lose a battleship than to lose a test match at Lords. Well, I don't know how many battleships they lost because we beat them at Lords so many times. The fact is that, Mr. Speaker, although we are not as strong, can we say we will abandon West Indies cricket? No, it is a creature of the region. And some of the cricketing greats, like Sobers, Kanhai, Hall, Griffith, Gibbs, they were not seen as Bajans or Guyanese or Andy Roberts and them in Antigua. They were not seen as members of different territories, but they're seen as West Indies cricketers. We supported them as West Indian cricketers, my friend, not as islanders. It was only when insularity stepped in that we declined in our cricket. And then we lost because we could not keep up with the technology that was introduced. But it is ours. It is something that we have to cherish. The second one, Mr. Speaker, the University of the West Indies. When it was proposed that we should set up our own university, a lot of people said, you gotta be crazy. Who will recognize a degree from the University of the West Indies? That was the thinking. Today, the University of the West Indies has produced graduates that are serving in every part of the world in the highest level, Mr. Speaker. And when we look in the legal field, they have served on international courts. Some have even advised the same Privy Council. So are we saying that we are not capable of building an institution like the CCJ to serve as our highest court of appeal? Mr. Speaker, I say no. We could, and CCJ could do it, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I support the CCJ. Because I believe that we can compete on equal or even better terms than many other countries in the world. Mr. Speaker, the second reason, and again it was alluded to by the member for the South. The CCJ, Mr. Speaker, will create an avenue or provide hope for some of our legal luminaries who, in their lifetime, may not be able to sit on a court like the Privy Council. Gone are the days, Mr. Speaker, when to study law, you have to be rich and you have to be famous. That same vendor I speak about, her son study law, do well, and ultimately could end up as a judge on the CCJ, or even the president of the CCJ, Justice Byron St. Kitts, Saunders St. Vincent the Grenadines, and who said that Grenada cannot produce legal luminaries to sit on the CCJ or to be president of the CCJ. It gives hope, Mr. Speaker, for people. Hope that they too one day can sit on a court like the CCJ, the highest in our region. So let's not take away that hope from our people. Let us build on it, Mr. Speaker. And the third and final point that I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is what I mentioned earlier. I believe that the CCJ provides the best hope for judicial reform at the lower level. There are some people who say, and I've been hearing it, before we can talk about joining the CCJ, let us fix our court system. And I'm not talking about the physical thing now, because the figure is rotten. Justice is not being delivered properly. Let us fix the lower courts. The question, Mr. Speaker, who is going to fix it? When they say let us fix it, who will fix it? The Privy Council has demonstrated over and over it's not interested in what takes place in our region. That's not their remit. They're concerned about listening, hearing appeals. Yes, that's their remit. So they can fix it. You cannot ask the government to fix it because we believe in separation of powers. So you want to ask the government to go and fix the judicial system? I can't see that. I can see government saying, okay, I'm going to change that judge, I'm going to appoint him. You can't do that. The question is, who will do it? For years, nothing been happening, the same thing been going on. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that with the CCJ, we will see changes at that level. And we have seen it already. Because the CCJ is already signaling to those judges to get the act together. These long delays in delivering judgment, they're saying you can't do that anymore. Justice delayed is justice denied. And therefore, I strongly believe that if we are to see improvement in our judicial system, the CCJ must be a reality, because the CCJ will be, in my opinion, that institution to impose those kind of conditions on our judges, to get them to act and to behave in a manner that will see the delivery of justice that our people, the ordinary people, are saying is eluding them at this point in time. So it is not, let us fix it first and then go to the CCJ. I am saying, let us go to the CCG and let us use the CCG to fix what we consider to be wrong at the lower level. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. Patrick West. Honourable members, just before we proceed, one of our parliamentary representatives, Honourable Representative for St. George South, has to leave on an urgent matter, but he has already spoken and may not be back in time to indicate his vote. I would ask you now, sir, when the question is put a little later, 2 responses would be required: the ayes and the noes. If you are not here on time, how would you like your vote to be counted?
Mr. Speaker, loudly and resoundingly aye.
I would ask the clerk to take note of this, please. Thank you, Honourable Representative. Honourable Representative for St. John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to make my contribution to the debate on the Caribbean Court of Justice. See, Mr. Speaker, as human beings, even in families, we never see, most times we never see things eye to eye, or we will never agree on the same things 100% of the time. So there will be disputes or misinterpretation of things, sometimes even if it's in black and white. So therefore, that is where the courts come in, so that they could resolve the disputes that we have. We know that we have seen other societies, I know, like the tribesmen in Afghanistan, and even those of us who watch the African movies, we see how the tribal, the leaders in the tribe come and they would listen to both sides and make a judgment, because they know the lifestyle, they say the same heritage and values. So it's more fitting for them to make that judgment. Likewise, we in the Caribbean, Mr. Speaker, we are very similar in our lifestyles and values. Much different than somebody, say, in Wales. So just the same way, we wouldn't like to see, or the people in Wales wouldn't want to come to the Caribbean to get their dispute resolved. Our Caribbean people shouldn't have to go to London to get our dispute resolved. I know even like the member from St. Patrick West spoke about the problems that we have on the lower courts. Well, Mr. Speaker, the court is not a good, it's not a word that people like, because we were brought up to be scared of the courts. Many people say they don't like courthouse. They don't want nothing to do with the courts. But in reality, we do have to go to a court sometimes in our lives, because sometimes it may not be through our own doing, but we have someone to go there. And we go there for justice. So we know that a lot of us have experience on the local system where sometimes justice takes 5 years longer. And the saying is that justice delayed is justice denied. So although we have these problems locally, we can't really pin this on the CCJ, because from the examples we have seen from the CCJ, I see that they, in some cases, in less than 2 days, they have give a judgment. And that's admirable for a court. And this is why, Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons why I would like to, I support them, because, well, I would just be short, Mr. Speaker, just to summarize. What it is that we need is that we need a court that would come to us and not one that we have to go to. And in short, Mr. Speaker, it is the right thing to do. So I pledge my support. I would also hope that the members of the constituency that I represent would give it a yes vote in the referendum. And as my colleague, Mr. Speaker, I'm traveling today, so just in case I am not here for the vote, I want to categorically say that I support the bill for the CCJ.
Thank you, Honourable Representative, for St. John, sorry. So then I am hearing you say, Honourable Representative, that if you are not here when the question is put, could you tell us what or how would you vote?
I would be resounding yes, Mr. Speaker.
I would ask the clerk to please take note of this. And this is because of the urgency with which you have to leave. Thank you, Honourable Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Representative. All right, we'll go Honourable Representative for St. Andrew Northeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to join my other colleagues in giving my full support to this bill, the CCJ Bill 2018. Mr. Speaker, I'll be very brief and short, but I would ensure my point is well driven home. Mr. Speaker, I am giving my full support to this bill because I firmly believe in my Grenadian and Caribbean brothers and sisters. I believe that they have the ability to deal with our own judicial matters. And I believe that they can dispense judgments in a timely manner and doing so without fear or any bias. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the issue of making the CCJ our final appellate court touches and concerns our Grenadian sovereignty. Mr. Speaker, I am a citizen of Grenada, and Grenada is a member of CARICOM. Therefore, I believe my final court of appeal should be based right here in the Caribbean region. And it should consist of judges who have a knowledge and understanding of our culture, our history, our traditions, our language and our dialects and the slangs that we use, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I believe the CCJ should be our final appellate court. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, our people should be given the opportunity to take matters further if they are not satisfied with the judgments handed down by the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, and not be discouraged because of the exorbitant cost that currently exists in taking matters to the Privy Council. Mr. Speaker, the time has come. It is time for us to take the bold step to make the CCJ our final court of appeal. And just as Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, would have said it, we have full control of our government. We have full control of our parliament. It is time that we take full control of our judiciary. Mr. Speaker, let us begin to break the remaining chains of colonialism. And the CCJ is a good place to start. That is why I say yes to the Caribbean Court of Justice. Our people, our region, our court. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative, for St. Andrew Northeast. Honorable Representative for St. Andrew Northwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to give my unwavering support to the Caribbean Court of Justice, Mr. Speaker. The time has long passed when we should rid ourselves from colonial past and deal with the issue that affects us, which is homegrown, Mr. Speaker, and it should be regionally owned as it relates to ascending, not to dealing with the Caribbean Court of Justice. Mr. Speaker, the former Prime Minister of Jamaica, P.J. Patterson, said, and I want to quote, "Can our sovereignty be complete when the final word on the law as an essential ingredient in the functioning of the state is still the subject of external decision making and interpretation by a foreign court that is not locally owned?" Mr. Speaker, the continuation of the Privy Council as the final appellant court is inconsistent with national sovereignty. There is a clear need to have a legal, permanent regional institution to authoritatively and definitely interpret and pronounce on laws in the region. The Caribbean Court of Justice must be such an authoritative institution. It is critical to the success of CARICOM and the regional integration. Mr. Speaker, many people will say that they have issues that politicians will intervene as it relates to the Caribbean Court of Justice. But in May of this year, Mr. Speaker, when Barbados held its election and the issue came up where the court had to act and act quickly, Mr. Speaker, it showed that politicians cannot interfere with that system. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, in 48 hours, so it speaks to time, whereas we have to go to London and it will take us months and very expensive, with the CCJ, we saw that in 48 hours, justice became relevant, Mr. Speaker, and the Caribbean Court of Justice became relevant as the people was made to vote in the election in Barbados. This speaks volume, and it shows that the politicians cannot intervene. Mr. Speaker, you know, sometimes when the things are local or regional, we tend to question its validity. The same thing happened when CXC came on stream, you know, because we knew of GCE, which was from London. So we said that GCE is better. And therefore, right now, CXC has proven its validity and its value and the quality of CXC, Mr. Speaker. And that is why it is good, Mr. Speaker, for us to look at our own Court of Justice, our own system, Mr. Speaker. It is time to it's a real good step, Mr. Speaker, in getting rid of colonialism, Mr. Speaker. I know it's a really small step, because just looking around in this parliament, Mr. Speaker, tells us that we have a lot more in terms of getting rid of colonialism, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, it's the right step, Mr. Speaker, in going forward, in dealing with the issues that affect us. So, Mr. Speaker, if we are ready to be independent, if we are ready want to complete the cycle of independence, this is the correct step to go, Mr. Speaker. And then we'll look at the other issues within Princess Alice Hospital, Mr. Speaker. We have people like Dr. Gibbs who did well, Mr. Speaker. And it's time to change those names, hospitals and those prominent places, because we can ask, what is London or the British doing for us at this point? So let us recognize our local people. Let us recognize the intellectual ability of our lawyers, and let us accent to the CCJ as our final court of appeal. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Representative for St. Andrew Northwest. Honorable Representative for St. Andrew South.
So, speakers, you would realize St. Andrew is going in one voice. Mr. Speaker, The question really is, what does this mean for the ordinary guy in Mount Horn, Mount Fan, Mount Parnassus, whatever the monks we can use as the example? Mr. Speaker, the opportunity we have is one that we need to grab. And through you, Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal to our citizens to take advantage of this opportunity that we have. Because so many times opportunities come by, we allow them to pass, and then we regret after. So some months ago, the initiative was led. We had a referendum. Two of the bills, one as it relates to terms for Prime Minister, one as it relates to having an opposition, those came forward in the referendum. Some persons said, vote no to everything. Don't support this. But I was amazed, Mr. Speaker, that some of the very same persons who hired trucks, hired persons to go around the island, saying no to this, were the same persons who came back after the last general election and say, we should have an opposition leader. We should set term limits. In other words, we had a golden opportunity for change. We had a golden opportunity to do what we wanted to do, but we allowed whatever it was to prevent us from accessing that opportunity that we had. So I'm going to appeal, Mr. Speaker, through you, to our people, to do the right thing, to take advantage of this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, looking at this situation that we have before us, the exorbitant cost of going to the Privy Council, I'm just thinking about the ordinary man in this scenario. How many persons in rural communities in St. Andrew, and I'm speaking specific to St. Andrew, even the town of Grenville, Mount Horn, Paraclete, Crowshoe, name them, Paradise, Union. How many persons in those rural communities wanting justice, dying to have justice, can afford to go to England? Mr. Speaker, the option we have is Trinidad. If you ask how many persons from Simon, how many persons from Mackay and Soubise have been to Trinidad, you would get real numbers. Because there are those who may be able to afford the plane, and there are those who are going to jump the boat in Grenville and get to Trinidad if they have to. And there are some who go to Trinidad every week. Mr. Speaker, the point is, accessing justice will be far easier for the ordinary man in Trinidad as opposed to England. But even better, Mr. Speaker, we have another option. Because there might be somebody in Post Royal, for example, who just can't afford the $200 that probably Sai Boat is going to charge them to go down to Trinidad. The added option is that technology can be used. So that person does not have to board the plane at all, does not have to go on the boat. That justice can be accessed from staying right here in Grenada. And we've heard of cases where this was done, related to this morning. And Mr. Speaker, what we want is more of our people to be comfortable that justice is accessible. And so what we are trying to do is to provide an opportunity for all of our citizens to feel comfortable that if they feel that they have the need to go beyond our Court of Appeal here, that they do have the freedom to do so. But not just the freedom, because having the freedom to do it and being able to do it, we're talking about two different things. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm appealing to our people, do not let this opportunity pass us by. I am appealing to us. The final thing, because I still recognize we have persons who have not spoken, the final thing I want to make note of is that persons may have doubts as to whether or not this is going to cost us something. So do we have to give up roads? Do we have to give up bridges? Do we have to give up roadwork to be able to benefit from this? And the answer is resoundingly no. We have already paid the price. We have already contributed financially. So if an ordinary person, maybe in Grand Bacolet, is wondering, will I get less benefits because government is going into this? The answer is no. Government would have already made its contribution, and there'll be no added cost for us going that route. And so, Mr. Speaker, I can't think of any reason why any Grenadian would want to say no to going the route of joining the CCJ. Let us make full use of the opportunity that is presented before us.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. Andrew Southeast. Honourable Representative for St. George Northeast. Did I catch your light first, I think, yeah?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I won't be very long on this one, but I too rise to give my support as we move to a more independent country. Mr. Speaker, as I look towards our history as an independent country, 44 years, we have been given our constitution as is. When you look at the world, the wider world and other countries, yes, the founding fathers, and they too have their constitution. And as the years go by and we develop as a people, we find that in this country they have amendments to the constitutions. And as we have become now, we cannot call ourselves young anymore. We're 44 years. And if this move, Mr. Speaker, make us a more independent country, then I'm for it. And I believe this move will make us a more independent country. I've heard the member for St. Andrews Northeast, Northwest, sorry. And I think she hits the nail on the head. After all, we are a Grenadian people. We are a Caribbean people. And what is relevant to us may not be even relevant to those over in the United Kingdom. As a matter of fact, they have started the process since the 1970s to get rid of us. And we continue to hang on and to clutch on to them. Mr. Speaker, I am, and I will ask all our people to support us as a more independent country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Representative for St. George Northeast. Honourable Representative for St. David.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm extremely proud to stand here today to support the CCJ bill as it's done. I would not repeat what was said. I want to look at it from a different angle. Mr. Speaker, the biggest project undertaken by CARICOM countries is the establishment of the CARICOM single market and economy. Biggest undertaking. It's still work in progress, but we have achieved quite a lot. As part of the Treaty of revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, there is a dispute settlement mechanism that you must use. The CCJ was established. It is the two functions in its original and appellant jurisdiction. In its original jurisdiction, you can hear matters pertaining to the interpretation of the treaty with regards to the CSMA. And all member states are part of the CCJ in its original jurisdiction, including Grenada. So we are part of the court, we have paid already, and where we are today is to join the CCJ as the final court of appeal, in keeping with this project, the CSMA project that we have undertaken. And therefore, I find it strange that the people who say they support regional integration and they support independence are against this joining of the CCJ as the final court. Because sometimes I wonder, what is the real motive? You recall, Mr. Speaker, when the idea of independence, going towards independence came up, there were a group that said, well, independence is good and we should get independence, but not under the current government. That was said, you know. We want independence, but not under Sir Eric Matugiri. Give me something else. And sometimes you feel that this sort of feeling is still somehow maybe playing a part and saying, well, we want this CCJ as the final court of appeal, but perhaps not under the NNP. We have to get rid of this kind of thinking, Mr. Speaker. It's for the country, not for NNP. This is not NNP or NDC. We happen to be in power as the party that's pushing it. But we're saying that as an independent nation, and we're going to celebrate 45 years next year as an independent country. Why is it that we want to hold on to this Privy Council that is based in London still, after 45 years? Where London have to still be serving us as an independent country? So, Mr. Speaker, coming back to the single market arrangement. And the point I think that is missed, the court hearing matters in its original jurisdiction, like the case in Barbados and the case in Trinidad, and so on. And people are applauding the judgment, saying, yes, look how swift the court moved, and they're satisfied with the ruling of the judges. Mr. Speaker, the same judges that sitting in the appellate jurisdiction, you know. It's not different judges. I get the impression that some people think different set of judges sit when it sits in the original jurisdiction, and the next set of judges sit when it sits in the appellate jurisdiction. The same judges of the CCJ are the same judges listening to the case, be it in the original or the appellate jurisdiction. So if they're so good in the original jurisdiction when they give the judgment, and it's well received internationally, what is wrong with it? What will be wrong when they listen to it in the appellate jurisdiction? We have to give credence to where it is due. We have excellent judges sitting there, listening to the cases and ensuring that justice is done. Because what's the point in saying that you can appeal to the Privy Council, but how many people could do that? The access to justice, if you have a system in place and you cannot access it, well, it's of no benefit to you. You want a system, and the court, while the headquarters in Barbados, but the court, it move around to various member states. So the court will come to Grenada to hear cases. They hear cases by using technology, video conferencing. Everything is done to make it easily accessible. And therefore, I do not understand the noise against it at all. I really, as a people, I think as we enter, I would like to see on the 6th of November, the CCJ succeed, so that when we're celebrating our 45th anniversary of independence in 2019, we can claim that we have made some strides in all that we have done and made further stride in having this Carrier Court of Justice as our final court of appeal. If you have cross-border dispute, who will listen to it? So we have a dispute between Trinidad and Guyana and Barbados and the other member states. That's one of the purposes, to listen cross-border trade dispute. The producers of honey have said to me, if we do not get the matter resolved, this year they're taking the matter to the CCJ. They don't have to wait until we get into the appeal, you know. It's the original jurisdiction. They will hear it. But they are expressing confidence because they said if they lose that and they take it to the appellate jurisdiction in the CCJ, they think they will get justice. And so they are really behind it. You know, they say we could, it's time that we use this CCJ, because they know that we are paying, you know. They know that it is costing us, and just to use it, so they want an opportunity, and they want to go there because they are very confident. And we need to get all other sectors, not just the business sector and the honey producers, but all our citizens to understand the real advantage and how much it means to the ordinary people. And I'll just finally wrap up by using the example. There is a policeman in my constituency who lost his case locally and appealed to the Privy Council. He was charged. When the bill came, you know, Mr. Speaker, he had to drop the case. Couldn't find more money again to pay. He paid the lawyers in England, and he just couldn't afford it. Just could not afford to go to the Privy Council when they give him the cost. And I think perhaps he's one of the persons that we should probably engage, let him explain his experience in trying to get justice in the Privy Council so that we can have a good understanding of what we are talking about. It's not easy to access justice. The high cost of going there, as mentioned by other speakers. And so, Mr. Speaker, I appeal to the entire voting population in Grenada that on the 6th of November, let us go out and ensure that we join the CCJ as the final court of appeal. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Representative for St. David. I am accused of not breaking away from colonialism, and I intend to ensure that I feed you. So I would adjourn, we would adjourn, have lunch, and return at 2:15. At 2:15, 2:15. It's now 1:15, so we return at 2:15. Honorable members, this House now stands adjourned. Go and have food.